and I want to welcome everyone to the work session today. Mary Ellen, could you do the notice of meeting statement, please?
Sure. A news release announcing the date, time, and place of the August 16th, 2017 Commission work session was mailed August 14th, 2017 to appropriate media and other groups or individuals who have requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the DDSN Central Administrative Office, video conference locations, and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested in advance.
Okay. Beverly?
Hi, everybody. Prior to the work session today, we sent you some information that was a summary of some of the budget, the feedback we received from the budget request forums. Some were much better attended than others. You also got a copy of the letter from the Human Service Provider Association, which was their provider organization's unanimous budget priorities. You also got something from Greenwood Genetics Center. And generally speaking, did some conversations with the various stakeholder groups about last year's budget request, because none of those items just kind of magically are no longer an issue. You guys might want to, move them around or change some numbers. I asked Tom and his staff to update some of the numbers associated with the budget request from last year, because there's been rate changes. If we're talking about moving the waiting list, there's been some things like that. We also wanted to take a few minutes fairly early in the discussion to talk about some things that from a staff operational perspective will need some consideration from the commission as far as budget request priorities that don't necessarily come from any of the budget hearings and are things that have come up or have changed since last year's budget request. And so wanted to just kind of have some of those conversations verbally today, depending on the conversation and how it goes today. Time allowing, we can work up any specific numbers or gather any information or write up some summaries between now and 10 o'clock tomorrow morning to have some documentation for y'all's committee meetings. But we didn't want to write a whole bunch up until you guys had an opportunity to discuss, and we at least kind of knew which direction y'all were leading in, and then we can have some conversations. So Chairman Ravenel, if it's okay with you, I'd like Tom to talk about some of the things that didn't come up. They're coming from like rate changes that DHHS made that are costing us more money, some of the things that we are seeing from a service utilization and needing to possibly change some rates, since you guys didn't get any paperwork on that.
Okay.
Well, a couple. One, the Haskell renewal is coming up, and they're asking us to put pest control in that waiver, a new service that we don't have currently in that model for the waiver. So it's in the ID waiver and the huge sport waiver. So it's in some of their waivers that they run, HHS. So it's we're projecting $300,000 or $400,000 cost that we would need money to be able to provide that service, which would be effective beginning of next fiscal year, July of 2018. So we will.
Can I ask a question? We have no pest service at this point?
Not in that waiver, not in the Haskell waiver.
And that's some of the feedback we've gotten from participants, is that that's a needed service, particularly if you're wheelchair bound or whatever.
Well, what I'm wondering is that not something we can slip in this year? I mean, you've got some problems that seems like we need to take care of this year, about a whole year from this.
We have to get it approved by CMS, so you can't just add it without, this is the appropriate time to add it through the renewal process. So that's what they're proposing, and we're in agreement with it. So we're adding that as a new service for the Haskell waiver. So we need funding, probably $200,000 or $300,000 is the impact there. So it's not major knowledge, but it's something y'all need to be considered of. And then in the ID waiver and the UCS waiver, there's a limit on environmental mods, what our cap that we can provide environmental monitoring.
Tom, talk about what an environmental mod is.
So we do a modification in the home, related to ramps or widening doors, and bathroom modifications to allow the individual to be able to use the facilities in the bathroom, shower and bath, toileting, things like that. And $7,500 has been the number that we've been using for 20 years since the waiver came in, since the ID waiver came into effect and then used 14%. Husky waiver is a different cost cap, it's $20,000. So it's a little bit bigger, so we can do a lot more things for the Husky population than we can for the ID and each four-way. So we're recommending that we add some additional dollars to that, maybe up to 15,000, double the amount. We would work with HHS over the next months to get it approved, get it worked up, so that if it is approved in the spending plan, in the budget request, we would be ready to do it in July of 18. We're thinking probably 300,000 or 400,000 there as well to be able to accommodate that. We have about 100 modifications that come through our system a year statewide, and they're capped, say, about 100. A lot of times families are putting money into the project to be able to make it work with the funding that we're able to do through the waiver versus what they want done in the house. So it's limiting our ability to help the family be able to stay in that setting and to be able to accommodate the consumer that needs our services. So those are the two big ones. We had other services that HHS is working with us on for funding. Nursing, they're looking at nursing rate increase for RNs and LPNs. We think there's money that they've got in their money, their appropriations to handle that. We're working with them on that as we over the last several months. So those are the two big items that consideration of additional money that's not in your documents.
So it's
Probably
based
about
about,
600,000.
well, about 700.
Okay, you added one.
Well, you said 300 for one,
Yeah, about
400,
400,
400 for the other.
yeah.
So that's new state dollars?
Right.
Is that gonna match anything? In other words?
Yeah, it'd be Medicaid.
So Medicaid would match
Right.
the dollars
Right.
we put into
We're
it.
putting in,
Right, okay,
to be a waiver.
okay. So we're gonna generate up more funds in those areas if we get state money. Okay.
Yeah, that's just the 30%.
Okay.
statement. That's the things that are not reflected in the documents that we gave you. If you want to go over, I know Chairman Ravenel was at the Charleston meeting and Commissioner Broughton was at the PD meeting, but we've done a summary in two different ways of the feedback we heard. I can comfortably say we didn't hear anything unusual that we weren't already expecting as a priority. It was pretty consistent, the top priority being continuing the effort of the wage increase, but most of the speakers were very careful to say that while this year's funds, the $9 million to raise the direct care staff wage was incredibly helpful, it was a step, not the completion, and that this year's budget request needed to take into consideration other positions that are not necessarily in the definition of direct care staff. And some examples, some providers have experienced house managers that weren't included in that because they weren't in the minimum staffing patterns. They've done the math and voluntarily taken demotions to be direct care staff because they figured out with that, plus a little overtime, they can make more money than they're making as a house manager. And so some other, what you would consider other support positions that may require a college degree are now $1, $2 away from the direct care staff, but the job requirements are different, the educational requirements are different. We heard a couple things specifically about case management and specifically about early interventionists, which I think is very healthy for discussion. I do want to point out, we did hear several things that DDSN, at least independently, does not have the autonomy to change the rate structure for. For example, all the changes that happened 5 years ago to case management and going to that 15-minute rate and how that translates into an hourly rate. DHHS is not going to change the personal care rate or the case management rate for one population or one service delivery system without changing it to the other pieces parts. So while we can advocate for that, while we can ask for that, it's going to have to be a joint effort and an agreement with DHHS on those things, those individual services that cross over the other waivers, for example, the waivers that they operate, that they would want that payment structure of those types of things to be the same. And so I can go through these, but I mean, that was pretty clear, stuck out without question as the top priority.
And I did tell, I had a, while I was waiting, I had a long talk with somebody. I mean, even though we did raise the rate of the direct care staff, they still, even though we have 4% unemployment, which basically is level unemployment in the state, they still have, I mean, in a lot of cases, they have like 60 people, positions they need, so we need to raise that rate. I mean, I think it was $11, and that's just not enough. We need to continue and get some more because we have such a terrible waiting list. So, I mean, I just asked, I said, well, how many do you think you're looking at? He says, probably 60. I mean, 60 people is a hell of a lot of people. So that needs to be a big priority this year. He said, you just got to continue it. So.
And per the discussions and the instructions from the commission last year, I know that in all the conversations that I or staff had, and I think that many of the providers and family advocates had similar conversations, it was described as a multi-year effort. It was described as we really need to be between 12 and 13. Is that what we thought last year, at least? That we recognize the likelihood that the General Assembly cannot do all of that in 1 year. And so that this was going to be a multi-stage, multi-year budget request process. Now, obviously, it's up to you guys to figure out where that priority is. But that's the conversations and how it was packaged last year. You want me to just?
Yeah, go ahead.
The next thing that we heard the most about was employment supports. And some of this was us having to kind of summarize a little bit. Multiple providers talked about the need and the desire to have more supports, funding supports for employment. And within that, we heard kind of a subset of that being transportation costs associated with supporting individuals for employment, and that spilled over a little bit into non-employment of direct care staff services during the day. So how do you serve someone in an individualized way? Let's say that they're seeking employment and you're, with the final rule, supposed to be serving them in a more individualized way, or let's say that they're only part-time employed and they're employed for 15 hours a week. What do you do with, and the transportation cost as it overlaps with providing more individualized level of care or types of care? And so just increased ability to help support people in employment. And we also heard pretty strongly, it varied a little bit based on what location that you were at as to how strong it was, but we heard a lot about building and vehicle maintenance, the need for one-time funds. And again, that would be one-time as opposed to recurring, to help with fleet management, to help with both residential homes and day program locations, keeping them up to what would be considered appropriate standards. And, some of the preventative maintenance and or just building updates if the building is 25, 30 years old type thing. We heard a pretty good bit about that. And then kind of we separated it out, but very similar and some overlap with compliance with the home and community-based settings final rule. As I think all of you should be aware, the implementation of that timeline was delayed. We now have till 2022, but this has been part of the agency's budget request for several cycles now, and we've not received new funds for it. Over the last year, the independent contractor with DHHS has been doing site reviews of the day program and residential programs. One of the things that has been pretty clearly stated, even with some of the more recent changes in the federal government and different interpretations, this interpretation has not changed. One of the things of if it's adjacent to what is considered an institution or day program setting. We do have several providers that have locations that are co-located right beside their day program. The likelihood is that they're going to have to move those. And so providers are trying to be very proactive and go, okay, if we're talking about real estate and we're talking about buying a home and selling a home, I don't want to be freaking out in 2021 and be figuring that out. We need to be doing that now. That's some of the feedback that's coming from the independent contractor that's doing the assessments for DHHS. And so that's something that's already being very clearly stated. And so providers, so not only, looking at the residential settings that we have now, are they compliant and what's it going to cost to get them moved? But also, again, the expectation of serving folks in a more individualized manner, that takes more hands, that takes more vehicles, and hands and vehicles take more money. And so things kind of associated with that. We continued to hear the need for training, and it came out in a couple different ways. Increased opportunities for training for individual providers. And so, and again, that kind of came out both, whether it's DDSN doing more training, bringing more people from outside, i.e. national or subject matter experts coming in, helping the providers have a structure to share some training amongst themselves. We also heard about the desire to have a little bit of a career ladder or some type of financial reinforcement for direct care staff that go through training and get certain certifications, so whether that's provider sponsored or on their own, how do you reward a direct care staff and again, that professional position and creating a career ladder, which spills over into some of the other strategic planning as far as job retention and job satisfaction and things like that. So that kind of intermorphed with that training opportunity. We did hear from one speaker about some of the advocacy organizations having the ability to do some subject matter expertise with community partners and other folks that might need education on whatever that advocacy organization's mission is. We heard residential expansion, and we heard it in a couple different ways, a few different ways, both with regards to critical needs and crisis management, with regards to aging caregivers, medically complex and behavioral. So we heard it kind of talked across all the areas. There was, particularly for providers who mentioned this, and the appropriate payment structure for them to feel comfortable expanding those services. So if you read between that line, it would also be, a possibility of what does that payment structure look like, which would have a larger dollar amount than just opening 5 new homes. So as far as some conversation with regards to that. We've heard about the ICF IID community rate that was on last year's budget request as well. And the need, if it's not going to be a redistribution of existing funds, if it's an infusion of funds to make the ICF, because we heard from a couple providers that while as a whole they're solvent, if you look at the different business lines, they're upside down on the ICF and having to make up for it from other business lines. And so the ability to increase that rate structure to keep that business line whole. And then other areas where we just had 1 or 2 people comment on it. It didn't necessarily flesh out as a bunch of folks. Waiting list reduction efforts. I do want to indicate that came up kind of in other areas, particularly when it comes to residential expansion and the need to meet some of the needs that the agency is not meeting. So that spills over into some other areas. Funding for post-acute rehab, transportation for those without jobs. The individual that said that, which is why it didn't get transitioned over to the other transportation, was just talking about out and out just flat transportation services. I want somebody to help me get from point A to point B. And so that's why it didn't get lumped with some of the other ones. Increased home and vehicle modification financial caps in the waivers. So that's what you heard Tom talk about just a few minutes ago. We did have an individual talk about that. And then we had a couple folks that acknowledged that DDSN was not the entity that states the rate or holds the money for the autism state plan services, but from an advocacy perspective, encouraging the agency to advocate for that rate change and rate increase that I know you guys have talked about before. And so that's kind of how it shook out. When at the public hearings, almost universally, there was time after everybody who wanted to speak had an opportunity to speak. So then we utilized the time to go over last year's budget request. So I'll kind of explain why it was on there, what it was, and try and solicit feedback from the group as to, was it still applicable? Should it move up? Should it move down? You know, in priority, is it no longer an issue? And pretty much universally, without exception, all of the items that were on last year's budget request, I got a whole bunch of nods that they're still high priority for this year and remain a need for the system. Didn't really get, you know, it needs to move up, it needs to move down. Just, yes, it's still a priority is the basic feedback that we got from those budget hearings, budget sessions, whatever you call them. Any questions about that summary? And again, while we didn't necessarily hear in the input about Greenwood Genetics Center, as we've talked about before, DDSN is the mechanism for any state funds to go to Greenwood Genetics Center. So you have in your packet a letter from them indicating, or it should be somewhere in here, indicating their request, and then the human service providers at one of their meetings voted specifically on their budget request items, and you have a letter from Susan John, their president, in there talking about, as that provider association, pretty uniformly what their budget request priorities are.
So are we going on to the budget report? Going on to the spending plan?
Well,
Yeah.
I would say we probably need to have some discussion.
You have some discussion?
I would like to point out two other areas
Okay.
that we haven't talked about. There are two pieces this year as it relates to parts of the budget request. If you will recall, last year, we had to do a 3% reduction plan. That's something that Governor Haley put into place, that if the economy takes a downturn, we wanted to know in advance from agencies where, so you guys did that last year. Governor McMaster's has required that this year as part, so we've included that in your packet of what you guys approved last year. We've not been given an official number. Look at you, I got that left. Okay, so we've asked, but we haven't got it yet. So, but we can come up with a rough number. Last year it was 7.2, so this year the rough number we're thinking would be what?
7.4, 7.5.
Yeah, between 7.4 and 7.5. So we can go and just proportionally adjust these numbers. You guys can revisit it and figure out how, if you want to change any of the priorities, but we are going to have to submit that again this year. And then there was another piece that this is the first year brand new, that, and I emailed you guys a copy of this previously as well, but asked for a section of the budget that anything that we want to recommend as an agency legislatively be changed. The title of that part of the budget request is Reduce Cost and Burden to Businesses and Citizens. For a lot of other agencies, it may be a recommendation to remove or reduce fees, those types of things. It applies a little differently to a service agency like ourselves. But if there's anything that we think that is legislatively increasing burdensome that we would want to request be revisited, this would be the form under which to do so. And so those are two other pieces of the budget request process.
If you're through the summary, I just want to ask something and see if we can work it in there. The strategic plan, we said that critical incidents were our #1 problem that we wanted to hit on. And I don't really see a whole lot going on with that. And I had mentioned this to you only, but I want to throw it out there. One of the problems we have is mental health. And I've noticed that I've read a lot lately about Department of Mental Health and Duke Endowment, South Carolina Hospital Association addressing telepsychiatry with like $9 or $10 million, isn't it?
Yes, they have, I think it's the second largest program in the United States,
Yeah.
South Carolina.
We probably aren't going to get that. But I do think if we had a psychiatrist and maybe 4 nurse practitioners in each region that could prescribe medication, that could be deployed for situations, that would be some kind of a safety net that doesn't exist right now for providers, and it's a desperately needed one. So there's a difference between critical incidents and crisis management. I understand that. So I don't know where we could squeeze that in. But I think telepsychiatry is an up-and-coming solution to these rural areas where mental health services are non-existent or rare. Yet we have a lot of patients, clients, consumers,
People.
people out there who are duly diagnosed. We have attempted suicides almost doubling. We have critical incidents due to aggression increasing rapidly. So is there a way for us to ask for some assistance in this area to form some kind of mental health service that isn't existing right now? Because I think that would help us with, maybe with the waiting list, and maybe with people their willingness, providers' willingness to take situations. And let me just say about the providers. I already feel like the providers are serving high management people already all over the state. They may not be getting credit for it, they may not be getting paid for it, but I feel like they're already doing it. So, you know, they've been very clear. Here's what we want. We want you to tell us what this person needs. We want you to tell us how much money you're going to pay in order to meet those needs. We want a backup plan. But it is very difficult to even get a band rate change if somebody has a psychotic episode, or if they have some kind of other situation that causes them to not be servable in their current environment. So we have to move towards giving providers the resources to be able to do that. It's not that they're cowards and mentors only for every provider in the state because they're afraid of big bad Tim Smith or whatever. It's because they need to know they've got the resources in place and there's a safety net in place if they do it. So I would like to see us incorporate something. I don't know where in this we could put it, but there's a huge need, and we need to be asking for whatever we need to lower those incidences that are occurring out there because we don't have the resources to address them.
And some of the stuff you just talked about, when Susan John spoke, and she's the president of the Human Service Providers, she said some things that are very, very similar in the sense of, you know, when we talk about needing to expand residential services for these populations, she was also careful on behalf of the association, which is why I'm calling her out, because she's speaking on behalf of a larger group, that including the supports, and one of the specific examples that was given was psychiatric and behavioral in rural areas. Okay, could DDSN do something to have a contractual relationship? She didn't necessarily mention telemedicine, but a similar thing in the sense that, you know, contract with so that they could be of an assistance to a provider that may not have that available in their community so that they could better serve some of the more challenging folks. And so some of the things that you were just talking about at least overlap fairly well with some of the things that we've heard.
Have we tried to partner with this mental health thing going on with
I'm
Duke?
gonna look at David's, we've had some
We've
conversations,
had
multiple
conversations
conversations.
with
They don't
DMH.
want to collaborate with us?
No, I don't want to paint them with the brush that they don't want to. There's some logistics.
They've got a resource issue. I mean, initially we tried to use or piggyback with off of their existing psychiatrists. They've got a lot more psychiatrists than we do, and psychiatrists are in pretty short supply in the state. They explored that. They weren't, after they looked at their overall picture, they weren't able to do that. They did, you know, offer assistance in trying to work with us to set up the actual the video technology to do that. And then they hooked us up with one of their headhunter groups that actually helps them recruit folks. And we had some meetings with them, and to date they have been unsuccessful in recruiting any psychiatrists that would be interested in serving our folks. We have, during the last year, increased the amount of time that we purchase from a contract psychiatrist, and we have had this individual actually go to each one of our regional centers. He does a monthly clinic and provides support. Doesn't cover all the needs, obviously, but we
No,
have.
but I understand he does a great job.
He's
He's very successful.
He is very.
And once they're stabilized, very often they can be returned to the community. But if we could step that up do we have any idea how much money we'd have to ask for in order to put those things in place for providers so that people could maybe stay in their own home?
Well, psychiatrists are very expensive, and again, part of it is it's a cost issue, but part of it is just availability. We have the same problem, probably even greater, that we do with behavior sports. You know, there are just not enough individuals with those credentials that are living here in South Carolina to meet all of our needs, so.
And it's a completely separate purpose topic, but I just happened to be in a meeting yesterday with John McGill where we were both presenting to a target audience, and he talked about how they've just received an expansion on their grant, and they're going to be expanding that. And what he identified as one of the challenges that while they've got the grant for the equipment, he's not sure he's going to be able to find a psychiatrist to expand doing it. So we're all
I
competing for the
realize
same
it's a
people.
shortage area, yeah, but I think we have to address what's happening with our critical incidents. And I'm not saying this is the only thing, but this is a big one.
And it's part of priority 3, is the needed funding, so.
Well, but I think what Commissioner Thompson would say is, could we rework priority 3, either the
Yeah,
dollar
maybe
amount or
work.
both, to make sure that we're accurately reflecting the telepsychiatry component
Yes.
of it, which I think is very doable.
And even maybe reach out to mental health again and see how much we would need. The legislature loves to see people collaborate. So we might have a shot, or maybe make it a separate one, you know, but however, we should feel comfortable that we at least ask for it, because we know it's a great need. The other thing is the ICF rate thing you have on here. Now, on the ICF rate, do we want to go and ask them for an increase when we know that it's not 3 to 4% that we're taking off the top, it's like 30?
Tom, I'm gonna let you kind of explain with the ICF, what components go into that from what DHHS pays to what with the provider.
I mean, well, aren't they gonna say to us, y'all are asking for more money for this and you're taking 30% off the top? I know I would. I'd be careful asking for that.
I don't know where you come to 30%. I mean,
It's not 3 to 4. I asked last month how much it was, and you said 3 to 4, and we both know it's a whole lot more than that. And from the providers that I've talked to, it's like 28, 30, 34 even. It's high.
I'm talking about what we get paid to what we pay our providers.
Right.
So some of the expense in there is depreciation, that on the buildings that we have, that we own, we put depreciation in those rates. So those aren't paid out to our providers, but we have to cover that through the units that we have on our books, the state assets. They're our books. So depreciation is one expense difference between that. And then all our administration of our QA process, our admin cost of central office and district office and things like that are played in there too.
There's also the 30% or the 30-day bed.
The
pay
central
that we
office,
pay.
the central office, what is included in that?
Central office administration, our cost here.
That's a high thing to take off. That's a high amount of money. These are high amounts to take off the top. How many ICS buildings do we own out there?
Probably 20, 25.
So how
Out
much,
of 50 buildings, it's probably 50.
okay, let me ask you this way. How much does DHHS pay for an ICF bid? I know it varies, but pay for an average ICF bid?
We pay one rate,
What is it?
$240 something.
And how much do we pay for providers?
It depends. If it's band R, band H, depends.
From what to what?
It's 85,000 annually for band H, is that right? And band R is around 90,000. So,
It's one of the highest administrative costs that we keep. ICFs with big.
I don't have the analysis. We've done this analysis several years ago.
Yeah.
And we can provide that to you, but it's not what you're saying. It ain't 30% markup that we're taking out.
Well, I think you ought to have the analysis yourself, because I think if you go ask
We have
for
an
more state
analysis. That's why I
money.
had it with me today. I didn't know you were going to bring it up. So
Well,
we could provide that.
I didn't bring it up, you brought it up on this, because you said you were in the ICF. You wanted to ask for state money to make the ICF adjustment.
This was y'all's plan. I'm not arguing. This is y'all's plan. We're-
Okay,
we're
but
going over
don't
the
you
plan.
think you ought to analyze, don't you think you ought to be able to say,
And one of the things that was briefly discussed, but the commission did not take action on it last year, I think it was discussed in the committee as a whole, but I'm not 100% sure, I'm going by my memory. But on that analysis, we had done analysis of where providers are over and under. And one of the things is because of the band system, which, you know, we're looking at moving forward to something different, but because of the band system that we have now, we use that band payment in a CRCF, we use that band payment in an ICF and a CTH. And so if you look as a whole, just what I said, providers in that line are under in ICFs. If you look at it as a whole, they're significantly over on CRCFs. So there was a brief conversation, no action was taken last year about, okay, internally balancing within, but there would clearly be winners and losers because not all providers operate ICFs, not all providers operate CRCFs. And so we agree that in the ICFs, it's upside down, but in the CRCFs, it's the exact opposite, and there's a pretty good profit margin on behalf of most providers there. And so there could be a system rebalancing, but within that, you're definitely going to have winners and losers as far as providers. So I don't disagree with what you're saying as far as it being out of whack. The band payment system, right, wrong, indifferent, moving to something different, but that's one of the caveats of that band system is it is an average system. And so that band payment applies to the multiple licensing in the multiple settings. That kind of help?
yeah, I just don't, we got how much money this year from the state? We got 9 million for the raises.
That's all we got other than like insurance.
Insurance. Do you know how much that was?
That's why we don't have a number. They haven't given it to us yet.
Okay, and that was it. There was, so year before last, we got
6.6 for
9 point.
waiting list reduction efforts.
6.6 for the waiting list reduction. We got 500,000 for Greenwood, 500,000 for non-emergency respite, 500,000 for post-acute. So I think it's 9.2.
I mean, the ICF rate definitely needs to be addressed.
Yeah, we agree.
It's just,
But we've had some meetings with the provider network, and we talked about what Dr. King just presented about CRCF and ICFs and where the balancing is, and we thought that was not the best approach, so we said we put it down as a request and try to address it that way, and that no one would be detrimentally hurt if we got new money to address the ICF band. We set up a separate band for ICF so they wouldn't be counted for with the band H and band R's or whatever. So that's what we're trying to go for. We know the 1.5 will get them in balance. That's state money, double that, triple that, it's almost $5 million for about 500 beds.
well, good luck with that. I think that's gonna be a tough one. I mean, I think that's gonna be a tough sell.
I mean, Vicky, I guess the question I'm asking, are you opposed to us asking for that money, or are you opposed?
No,
or-
I don't want us to lose total credibility. I mean, I think when we're taking that much off the top, somebody's gonna say, can you stop doing it?
Okay, so the issue is not about the request for money, the issue is the implementation of this money.
I think
Yes.
the strategy's a little strange, yeah.
Okay, I mean, that's a separate thing we want to address in like the spending plan as opposed to the budget.
Well, no, I think we need to ask and spend equally. I think we need to ask for what we want to do, and then
Right,
we
and
need to
that's the
take and
second
actually spend it like we're supposed to.
But I'm just trying to stay focused on what your objective is with regard to the
Well,
budget.
my
request.
thing is, Gary, is that when you take this thing and you ask for it, and you're sitting at the hearing,
I was there last year.
and, and somebody's gonna say, well, so-and-so told me that y'all taking this off the top, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And they're gonna say.
And sometimes it is educational of exactly what that means. And I understand Tom was not told to be here today to justify that ahead of time.
Yeah, well, I would
And
think,
you're saying it's 30%, and I've heard different numbers, and Tom's saying it's not 30%, and I don't know that we as a commission have gotten a specific answer for that, other
we haven't
than,
analyzed it yet.
Well, I understand, I mean, my understanding from Tom is that that analysis. was
Well,
done a couple
Gary,
of
I
years
think
back.
we were here to discuss the budget
I
request.
understand, I understand.
And so I don't think it's I don't think it's unreasonable to ask somebody to tell us what the actual numbers are.
Sure.
At this work session, because we do have time for them to get it. But I'm questioning that on there being on here, because I think I don't think it's, I think they're gonna question that. And they're
So-
gonna question
so again,
us,
it
and the
comes back-
commission approved
Comes
this?
back to my question of, are you asking to take this off or not? I'm just trying to figure out what you're asking for with regard to this particular item,
No,
with
how
regard
much,
to our budget request.
she's asking to take it off, I think she wants to find out, are we really taking 30% off the top?
I mean, that's legit.
Yeah, I mean, that's legitimate, and
I think that's very
I'd like
legitimate.
to know, I mean, is that something you can give us in the next couple hours?
What was your
I mean, are you really taking, how much are you taking off the top, off of
It's
these?
all done to the culture board. The culture board runs the numbers. It's based on a methodology that is approved by Medicaid. So we run the numbers and it's allocated down, and this is what is proportioned to the ICF program. So it's not any monkeying going on, and we're not raking off money. We're trying to stay whole. We're trying to get the providers what we can give them to run their program. We know it's underfunded. We can't do it with just making up money. We got to have new money to make it whole for them. But like Dr. Shammy said, we know that they're also got winners on other business services that they have. So, but we still don't want anybody to become negative. We know we can adjust the rates by moving CRCF funding down to the ICF, and that would throw some people in financial stress. We don't want that to happen. So we need new money. Now, 30% is just the way the ICF allocation goes for them to get that kind of percentage. It's not anything that we're doing monkeying with things, it's just how the allocation goes. We
All right,
got
so-
Appreciation in there, we got other things that we have to cover that not in their cost.
So I'm
So-
saying, I'm not asking to take it off, because I think it needs to be addressed. And I am saying sincerely, good luck with that. But just keep in mind that, it's a problem. It could be a potential problem. They're gonna kind of question that. So you're gonna have to be prepared for that, because it's out of whack over here, and it's in whack over here, and you're choosing to ask for something that's, one of the highest at admin cost in the system programs you operate. It's one of the highest. I mean, it's not, like respite is 13%, 19% for day programs. I don't even know what the rest of them are, but ICF seem to be the most unequitable administratively charged programs that we operate. So I just want to point that out. I wish we had the analysis on it. We don't, but I'm not asking to take it off. And I think the priority that you have everything in looks pretty good based on what the public input has been, but in particular, the direct care workers. The only thing I would ask, from my point of view, that we would look at would be the critical incidents and the mental health request to have resources to address these problems that are out there.
I guess the follow-up is the question that becomes, really what we're interested in is there a way we can reduce that 30%? You say it's 30%, whatever that administrative cost is, whatever is not being passed
Well,
on.
like you said, I don't
What
think
can
that's
we do? What can we do to make more of that money get down to the providers?
I think
Ultimately,
that's,
right?
I agree that that's part of the spending plan discussion, not the budget request.
All right, I'm gonna throw one in, because I love to find out about direct bill. If these people direct bill, how much more money would they get
Be based on their cost. They're gonna-
based on their cost?
Yeah, they're gonna, HHS is gonna get them to, and they started that process a few years back, but it's kind of on the shelf. They would ask for their cost report data, and they would adjust it to those rates.
Plus, they would get that 30% that we're getting also.
No, they would not get it, it's based on cost, based on that's what Medicaid is, for services, it's cost justified. So they're gonna get what their cost should.
Yeah, but
Right now,
that's kind of misleading. Let me tell you why. If it were in their budget based on what HHS gets, I know, because I ran an ICFMR, and I have one of the highest per diems in the state. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I knew how to get those costs that they would approve and spend it and get reimbursed for it. So they, the nurses, the nutritionists, the dietitians, all those things that they're supposed to have, and they're right now robbing from day programs to provide in ICFMRs. You know, those things are paid for by Medicaid because they're required. And now providers are out there having to take money from other programs and make ends meet in ICFMR, so they're still taking it, robbing from Peter to pay Paul. But the thing is their rates would possibly go up because they'd be able to spend it on the things they're supposed to be spending it on. That's how it works. It's reimbursement. But go ahead.
You gotta have state match to do it. Like, you can't just arbitrarily increase your ICF to a level that's unmanageable if they don't have state match to do. So you can't have $1,000 rate. They would never go along with that. They don't have the dollars.
I didn't say they would.
Well, it's not unlimited, is what I'm saying.
No, but instead of paying it to you, they could pay it on services and their rate would still be high.
Like I said, the dollars that are put into the cost report are justifiable dollars. There's no unallowable costs going into the ICF to justify the rates that we get.
No, but it's things like depreciation and things that y'all need.
Yeah.
It's not program service needs, but we
But
can
those
debate
are
that all
legitimate
day.
Medicaid costs. Those
Yeah,
are
I know
legitimate
what
costs.
they are because I did it. I know.
I don't think anybody's saying that there aren't legitimate costs. I mean, I don't think there's any accusation of that. The question is it the, for lack of a better word, the best use of those funds to try, if our objective is to try to make sure that everything is.
We're always looking for efficiencies.
Right.
There's ways
That's-
to reduce dollars and.
And again, I think that's gonna come down to
administration.
spending.
You know, we can,
So
and we did that in years past. We cut a lot of staff out of administration and all that. So
That's-
we're always looking for ways to, we're not trying to grow our administration. We're trying to put dollars in service. Sure.
I have a question about Gary. We always have to, I saw Greenwood's request, and I think Greenwood does great work, but we look at it, it's not like $500,000 a year, so I think what was the last one, like they're getting like 19 million a year, and they ask for 500 more each year.
Yeah, 12 million.
Was it
Yeah,
12? Okay, whatever. On their request for 500,000 more, I didn't see a lot of specifics. Like, what are they, I mean, and we have to go justify that as part of our budget request. And they seem to get that money a lot. I don't know if they do a lot of lobbying themselves.
They have their own.
Do they?
Um,
So we're,
component to that,
Okay.
yes.
because it just, I see what they're requesting, but there's not a lot of specifics there. And I don't want the legislature to say, well, we're giving you 500,000 more for Greenwood when we're not in control of any of that or anything. There were a lot of specifics with Greenwood's letter of request to us, saying exactly what that $500,000 was getting them. It was just, hey, we want $500,000 more because we still don't have complete coverage across the state. So that $500,000 is going to be X number, Their
Yeah.
justification didn't seem as much as.
And we can ask them for some more detail so that we.
And I really like that.
But I mean,
I don't
but that's it, it's population expansion and.
I don't want to throw Greenwood above the I feel like they do, but that letter seems a little bit lacking to me if somebody was to ask that question. We're trying to justify every penny, and they just say, well, we just like $500,000.
Well, they ask for it every year,
Right,
and they obviously, there's a senator out there.
Right.
And he makes sure you can get it.
yeah, sure.
Because even though we didn't give new money last year, they
They
still
did.
got
did.
money.
They always
Yeah,
give
they-
money.
and again, they do a very, very.
Last 3 years, they got it.
Yeah,
Prior to that, they weren't getting any money, but they did 15, 16, and 17.
right.
And every year I ask them, they say, Steve, we just don't even ask if we're gonna get it, and it's gonna come through us.
Right.
We're
And
just a conduit, it's
And
kind
that
of
may
like,
be, I just want to make sure it's not negatively affecting our budget requests that we have
What they-
theirs.
What they want to do for this money they ask for is develop a model of treatment for autistic population down the road. So they would go and get an administrative grant, which they did for a lot of the services, metabolic, they did that, started out as an admin. Trying to develop treatment plans. And once they get it developed, then they go into fee for service. So this is kind of a springboard for them to be able to look at different testing models and stuff like that, and then move it to a fee model down the road. But they need to start money to get that going. That's what this $500,000 they're asking for.
It just didn't really say that in their letter of request. But,
Okay.
I mean, well, not, at least I didn't say. That was my question. And I agree.
Aren't we more or less a pass-through?
We are.
yeah, it is.
We are, but it shows up on our budget. I don't want some senator saying, we're giving you this $500,000. Really, they're not, because we are just a pass.
They're only giving it to us because they can't give it directly to
Right.
Greenwood, so.
Exactly.
That's pretty much it.
Exactly.
That's
Well,
exactly.
they are doing services for us. I mean,
Sure, and very, very valuable. So
Yeah,
I mean, I'm
changing
not trying
lives.
to say,
Changing lives.
I just say, well, we have to justify almost $100, and they just say,
Give me 500.
give me $500,000 more because we need more coverage around the state. Sure, I'd love to just, we need more coverage around the state. Give us
We need to hire them.
$32 million more. That was.
So with regards to the budget request, what do you guys want staff to prepare, if anything, for tomorrow's discussion? I just want to make sure that I'm not sure we're all on the same page.
It would seem to me that some of what you were asking for with regard would sort of fall into that crisis intervention. I mean, we talked about having a rapid response team to get in, and a lot of that was psychiatric based. Maybe we could hold some of that. It was sort of a pilot program, for lack of a better word, to see that. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of connections there. If we wanted to put something in there under number 3,
Yeah,
it would seem to fit in that category really well.
There's at least one person that we're gonna be asking for the money who I've heard directly say the word telepsychiatry. They don't know about.
Mhm.
So that's really wrong.
Yeah, I think
We
that
need to-
makes a lot of sense, whether we look at that, as opposed to temporary residential.
Yeah.
Because again, I've heard the same thing. When you
But
come
it's a
back,
good idea. I'm
It's
not
a-
just saying we put it in there because somebody,
no, I agree. And I think it's part of that whole, exactly what you said in terms of what I've heard of us is I would really like to have that additional support when I have somebody who is behaviorally challenged, when they have a particular incident, that we have that resource. I mean, that's why I've always been very much in support of that. I refuse to call it the SWAT team, but I hate that.
but as a
line. It's
local
something
board member, I don't know if you were rural, would yours be rural?
we're,
Rural. Well, I
we
mean,
have,
if
depends on
you,
what part of the county you're in.
mental health is like,
It's
they're
very-
yours.
Yeah,
You
no,
deal with
yep,
it,
100%.
And
Yep.
then we end up with the emergency room.
Yep.
And they're doing some telepsychiatry, and I think that's a good thing, but there's gotta be a way for us to get in on some of that. This is your area, what do you think?
I don't know how to make it so, but
No, but
yeah,
are you a telepsychiatry fan?
I've not had any experience with it.
Okay. Well, I just wonder how it's working with mental health and duking down that crap. I wonder if that's working.
To hear Mr. McGill describe it, it's working swimmingly.
That makes me so jealous that we don't have that.
Yeah, like I said, they're got an expansion, so to speak.
But other than that, I think it's good. I mean, I think we're,
Well, I just heard Commissioner Lamel talk about within that crisis, I mean, we can add verbiage to highlight the telepsychiatry, but the kind of the way it's broken down, does the commission want all those components to remain? Are we moving around, replacing, adding? I'm not sure I'm clear.
Well, the crisis intervention psychiatric support here, I think we're gonna need a little bit. more than
I agree, I
$150,000
think that would pay for
for
a
one.
part-time, no, not even a whole one part-time,
Part-time.
and that wouldn't be any of the equipment.
Okay, so, I think we're gonna have to ask for more than that.
significant resources into that.
Well, and the question becomes, do we want to try to adjust some of what we have in there? I mean, we put up $750,000 for that rapid response team. It was sort of the idea behind it, we were gonna try it sort of in one area, as sort of a pilot to get this off the ground and show the return from it. And as part of that was
What is that?
there was the short-term residential, if we needed to bring somebody out for a period of time.
The regional team.
Yeah,
That's what.
that was that
SWAT
rapid,
team.
yeah,
But
as
we
I call it, the
didn't get it-
rapid
we
response.
didn't get it
We
last
didn't get
year,
any money
did
on
we?
that, they didn't put us.
Well, maybe we should look at a different approach.
And that's what I'm saying, do we want to change the language? Do we want to go away from that rapid response team and just try to go more towards?
I mean, if you're gonna do it the rapid response way, then you could have the psychiatrist and the nurse practitioner. I think you need somebody that can prescribe medicine. I mean, at some point in time, you have, somebody needs a shot of Haldol or, a pill or something because they're bouncing. So there's that, but then we also need behavior support as part of that approach if that's the approach we're gonna use. So I don't know.
And I do think we can look at it a little differently than last year. You know, one of the things is that a lot of the providers have a hard time recruiting those types of positions and having that relationship with that specialty psychiatrist, somebody at the behavioral supports. If we at the state agency had those relationships, those contracts, that employment agreement, and then made those resources available to the providers, I think we could look at it not in just one little region, we could look at it balancing the needs of the state. So I think that some of the stuff that's in here, part of that regional crisis team, the reason why it was regional is because there was the assumption that they were boots on the ground within a certain period of time, and they would physically go to that location. If we're looking at limited resources, we could look at that same dollar amount or a tweaked dollar amount and go, okay, we're gonna look at that for telepsychiatry supports and a contractual relationship with behavioral supports, and then it wouldn't be limited to a region. It would be to support providers statewide that didn't have that support in place.
Right, and they have all kinds of software. This is called telemental health client management engagement software. That's a really reasonable one, but it's something that you could, I mean, very, very basic compared to what we're talking about with mental health and stuff. But it works into case management as well. So I don't, my question on that was, is Thera, which is a whole different
It's a whole different animal.
but is there any module within Thera for any mental health?
More of a tracking perspective, not necessarily
Service
a
provision.
consult. No.
Okay.
What about these groups, so what, even though it's state, if it's strictly tele, can't we separate that where we have rapid response versus telepsychiatry? They don't have to be state or anything, they have to be licensed here, but there are practice groups around the country that do this specifically. I mean,
Contract out.
that's exactly right. That are technically licensed in South Carolina, they're licensed.
Yeah, I was about to say, I mean, I think that we would have to
They
make
don't
sure
have to be
that from a
South
billing
Carolina based.
perspective, that they were,
Again,
Or
you
we get
separate
100%
both
say
of
dollar.
them, you got some better than nothing, and it's all telepsychiatry.
But, you know, I think we could probably contract with, you know, we love to contract with USC, but I mean, that's a
Well, that
close
type of
thing,
schools,
yeah.
you know, national corporate, I forgot I said that. Private owned
Yeah, watch
groups,
yourself.
I know. But I'm thinking from a distance, they can't do us too much wrong. But yeah, you know, there are groups that do that. And
and I think from a budget request perspective, we can make sure that the language appropriately describes, and if we're fortunate enough to look like in the budget cycle that we're getting, then we can try and figure out options and explore. But for the purposes of the budget request, as long as we use language that includes the buzzword of telepsychiatry and, you know, and kind of describes that as the agency establishing a centralized relationship in order to support the individual provider, then I think that translates well into a budget request.
I think it might.
I just see these two functions. I just see that local piece is one, and we're gonna fight that, and I have a tough time landing that. But that one-to-one FaceTime in person, but the other part of it, I think, is where we could get a big effect for our buck, if we could get that rolling in the right direction by pure video conferencing facilities.
And some of these nurse practitioners are outstanding in mental health, the ones that are certified in mental health. They're really good. They're up to snuff. So if we, you know, if you could get one for every region and the psychiatrist to precept, it might be a good model. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think, unless I misunderstood you, Bill, I think that if we reworked this to not have it be a regional team, to have it be statewide supports in a contractual manner, whether it be tele, whether it be, I mean, a little of both. I mean, did I describe that? So in other words, we would no longer be asking for a regional team. We would be asking for different support, so that way it could apply where it's necessary across the state. And depending on how much money we get, maybe we could have one per region or whatever.
And we could,
That's my point.
Okay.
and we could rename number 3, we have it as crisis, but we could name it psychological intervention and stabilization for individuals. As opposed to focusing on just the crisis team, we could say, you know, development of a better statewide psychological delivery.
I would break out the
Psychiatry.
residential component.
Right, yeah, but psychiatry,
Yeah,
I mean,
because-
we could do that if that's the direction that we want to okay, well, I'm,
That's a good idea
We didn't get
because
it
we don't
last
need to
year,
wait
but-
till it becomes a crisis.
right, yeah, ideally, yeah. And if we have better baseline support, then hopefully that would reduce the crisis
Right.
intervention. Yeah, I mean, I agree. So we, again, we didn't get last year going on the crisis mode, so
Didn't
we,
get it.
right, we didn't get a lot.
No.
So maybe
I don't get to see that I'm spending all this time on it, but
if we
it's
adjust
worth a
the,
shot.
yeah, well, I mean, that's exactly what we got.
Yeah.
But if we adjust the approach on it, maybe it's something forward, that maybe it's something that will take root, like you said, with somebody who's interested in that side of things. So I don't know. if we're-
Are you guys
that's what
wanting-
we're
all right.
talking about.
I got a little sidebar here. I think Susan can add to this conversation.
Oh, what he wanted me to share was this morning I was at the South Carolina Behavioral Health Coalition meeting that was convened. And I was late because I had another meeting. And I had a nice hallway meeting with the new mental health director of telepsychiatry. And he indicated that it would be a good idea for us to become part of the South Carolina Telehealth Alliance. And that group and mental health are trying to expand into other areas of services to provide telehealth, not just psychiatry, but also, like I mentioned, behavioral support and some things like that. But he did confirm what we were saying about, you know, the number of psychiatrists are a problem even with their staffing agency. They have a hard time, which, you know, is very in line with what David was saying is, you know, mental health was interested in helping us get started, but they weren't really going to provide psychiatrists because they have a shortage themselves. But it's definitely, you know, something, we have some existing support that's reaching out to us, I think, to try to get us engaged, so it's a good time.
And we can engage in that partnership regardless of the budget request, and then if we're fortunate that we might can engage more heavily. So, I want to make sure that I'm clear. So are we taking the temporary residential off the table? Or are we pulling residential out and putting it somewhere else? What,
No, I don't think you can. I think somehow you need to rework regional team and psychiatric support.
okay. And so have that, it's still as a subcategory under crisis?
You need the beds when you need them.
Well, that's what I'm saying, but I'm not sure it should be collapsed into the same.
Away from that term crisis.
You do?
I do.
Psychiatric intervention and stabilization.
Something like that, yeah.
Then we pull residential and put it in a different part of the budget request, based, okay? Because it's hard to package, it's hard to package those together.
Yeah, I mean, basically what we'd be looking at, taking out there is the,
And you have a lot of data that you can use to make this request.
All right, so. And you guys want to leave the TBI in there?
Well, that's a huge need.
Yeah, and I think that fits better than the other, the
yeah.
residential part.
Yeah,
So we've got going by last year's request, we've got targeted residential in budget priority number 2 that was aging caregivers, and then we have a different chunk of residential in number 3 that was, you know, targeting those folks for behaviorally challenging high management. Do we want to combine those and just talk about residential in general with those two populations? I mean, how do you guys want that to be presented? And Tom, you want to give a couple, I know that you, from last year's, you and your folks worked up some, we need to update these numbers based on current rates too.
Yeah.
The dollar doesn't go as far this year as it went last year.
For the first party, which is the dollar increase going from $11 to $12 direct care pay increase, instead of $9 million, it would be a $10 million request.
For a flat dollar increase.
That $1 increase.
So it's just $1 million increase.
no, it's
$10
$10
million
million.
for a dollar.
$10 million to get the, I think it was $9 million to get.
And
from
that's
11
just,
From 10 to 11, we'll need another 10 million to get from 11 to 12.
and that's only for direct care staff. That does not include the other positions. And again, I want to make sure that I'm communicating clearly. We heard that very loud and clear and consistently. If there was a request this year for pay, they were strongly asking that it not just be limited to direct care staff, that it be some of the other staff within the organizations as well.
What would we need that for that?
Last year, we'd included a million in that for compression and retention. I'm thinking it's probably a little bit more than that, but not,
No.
1.2,
That doesn't
1.3.
include case managers, yeah.
No, it does not. So if you guys are wanting it to include that broader, which we did hear a lot about, we heard a lot
Yeah, we
about
did.
case managers and EI. Again, we can, if we got the money, we have to have a conversation with DHHS because the case management rate is the case management rate. And unless it's something specific to our waivers, which I think there can be conversations about case management in the waiver as opposed to MTCM, they're not likely to change the MTCM rate for our population without changing it for other populations. Same, with EIB has a little difference, so early interventionist. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't advocate for it, that it shouldn't be part of our request. I just want to make sure that I'm clear. We do not have the autonomy to go do that all by ourselves.
We can't do that. So does that mean we can't change what their salaries are?
The individual provider sets the salaries of the case managers, but those salaries are based on what they're able to bill at the
Right.
15-minute rate.
Right.
Now, based on recent conversations, particularly since the IDRD and the community sports waiver have been renewed, I think there is a renewed opportunity to possibly change that unit from a 15-minute unit, but I don't want to put the chicken,
Yeah, no.
egg before the hatch type thing.
The ultimate question is if the legislature and the wisdom said, yes, we need to get some more money to these people as well. Are we saying we can't do that unless DHS then says, yep, you need more money?
Correct. No, we cannot. It's a little different from residential and day because those are really only within our system, but the services that overlap into other, we can just change that autonomously, and that would require DHHS receiving new funds as well. Yeah, so the compression and retention, it would be more of those house manager, what we're talking about, those house manager positions, those, administrative support positions within a provider organization, job coaches, some of those other type things. But it's got to play out as far as, it would be difficult for a pure case manager or, because you can't supplement the Medicaid rate. So we've advocated for 5 years that that needs to change. So,
Advocated to DHS.
well, we were never a big fan of 15-minute unit to begin with, but.
So we're talking about.
They're
on the
they're
compression-
furiously talking
On
amongst
the
themselves.
compression
So
retention, what's the number that we're asking for who we can help out? The house manager, what the compression retention number instead of 1 million a year? What do we need to ask for? I heard 1.2. I'm just trying to get a number.
Yeah, probably 1.2, 1.3 to cover the people as the house manager. We got one like each management as well. We all.
well, I mean, again, based on recent conversations, the possibility of changing that unit rate for waiver case management, not for MTCM, but for waiver case management, if that goes online, if we had additional funds, then that would be taken into account, whatever that new rate structure looks like. So I don't want to give the impression that gets taken off the table, but waiver case management is not live right now. We're still using MTCM, and that crosses populations, so that rate is set by Medicaid and goes well beyond our system. But the waiver case management, which is not live, which could go live, that's where we might have a window to help our system. So, I mean, again, I'm not discouraging the commission from putting it on there. I'm just trying to make sure I'm clearly communicating where our authority is.
What I'm hearing though is they can put $10 million in that, and we have no way to actually get it to those people.
The one mechanism that we might have would be waiver case management,
but as-
switching to that from
But as it
MTCM.
exists right now, I'm
Correct.
honestly on the what I'm saying, as it is right now, the legislature gives those funds. And you have essentially no way to get that money to the people who it's intended to get it.
Without DHHS changing the
Without
rate,
DHS changing it.
which would have implications for their budget. Okay, so, and then with the waiting list, Tom, I'll put you on the spot again. We updated those numbers too because the rates have changed
Right.
since then. So we need updated numbers for them.
Right. So we do 950 for the ID waiver, it's gonna be a $4 million impact. If we do 50 for Haskell, because Haskell's continue to have, growth in the extra slots, it'll be another 500,000 for that. And then for residential, 100 beds for aging caregivers, that would be, 2.3 million, right? So total,
2.2 or 2.3?
Yeah, Tom, can you, I'm sorry.
It's 4.5 for the at-home, it'd be 1,000 slots, 950 for ID waiver, and then 50 for the Haskell waiver. So 4.5 million for those at-home slots, and then 2.2 or 2.3 for 100 beds. So it's right at $6.8 million. So, yeah, that's 6.4.
And then we're talking about moving 2 million from number 3 up to number 2 as well. Right?
That, if that's, yeah, that's how you guys would like us to work it up. Move it up to priority 2.
2 million for residential.
Is that still 50 beds or does it need to be like 2.4 or something?
We're gone a little bit now.
And I'm making sure, are we taking off the temporary residential beds completely? Did I interpret that correctly?
So those would be like respite and things like
They
that.
would be short-term admission beds for crisis management.
Or would we want to take it off when we need it?
I don't know, maybe,
I think
okay, so we're leaving that on,
Oh,
and we're leaving that
definitely.
under a repackaged psychiatric?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay,
Do we have any sort of idea on the number for the telepsychiatry thing, or we're just gonna kind of, as opposed to the regional team, we're just gonna call it, I'm just gonna put 750,000 towards that?
I'm looking at Susan, who had the most recent conversation.
$1,000 for a full-time psychiatrist. It's about $5,000 per video unit, but are you listening to this? Couple $100,000 for a full-time psychiatrist.
At least,
About
yeah,
200.
I think I would go more like
Okay,
250.
yeah, I was thinking of a young one. And then 5,000, or 5,000 per video unit setup, which is all we were quoted. And then I don't know if the software is part of that or not. So just-
Yeah, and that's just psychiatric, that's not behavioral supports, which we know is a need.
Yeah, we
And,
have
you
support
know,
person
so-
making rough 120.
Although Commissioner Thompson made an excellent point about nurse practitioners. They're great physician extenders. We use that a lot in our centers.
We do.
Works very, very well. So that definitely should be part of our package.
And there are physicians who specialize in mental health that are not psychiatrists.
Yeah, I mean, I think since we're kind of, I think if we combined the 750 and the 150 and kept it at the 900, I think that we could easily justify that with requested salaries.
Okay.
Keep the dollar amount the same. Okay, we moved stuff around. So number 4 has to do with continuing to transition from the regional centers. I know that, and we're going to work up some concrete numbers. Commissioner Chairman Ravenel asked us as an alternative solution for some of the response to crisis, because I mean, we're not doing a good job right now. We've got our critical list is growing, and the length of time that people are staying on there and the number of people on there. And so to discuss the pros and cons of possibly utilizing the regional centers for some of the crisis management. There are definite pros and cons to that. So I want to make sure that I'm very clear as far as that and some of the national trends and expectations. With regards to that, we're going to work up some concrete numbers on what that would cost. I think as far as conversations today and spilling over into the spending plan conversation, we can't do that in a revenue neutral way. I mean, there's just no way. If it's not done with new funds, then where do the funds come from? As far as the conversation. But as far as the budget request goes, this has been something that we've requested, and last year we did not receive any, but for the prior 2 years, we have one of the lowest per diems in the country, which is good and bad. We used to be above the national staffing average. We are now below the national staffing average. We also hear from providers that are interested in serving people wanting to leave the regional centers that the acuity level and that what it's taking to serve those folks are going up. And so I describe this as both sides of the coin. It's within those regional centers that we have the resources necessary that they can meet those expectations, and that as people leave, we have the payment structure appropriate to help support the providers to serve those folks out in the community. But because we're having a challenge with our system as far as crisis, we've tried really hard to keep the front door to the regional centers cracked. I would say that crack has widened because we've had to meet needs and we haven't had community options to meet those needs. So we're seeing a heavier reliance on the regional centers. We also heard, it's not necessarily reflected in the summary because it was couched in parts of conversation, but we also heard in part of the public input several providers that talked about their need for the regional centers as a crisis management, and if they get to the point that they don't feel like they can appropriately serve someone, that the regional centers function as that safety net and that backup system, and the need to make sure that the resources are appropriately there for regional center staff. So it's a continued need. How big of a need may depend on some of the other decisions that you guys make, but it will continue to be a need. And it's great that we run a lean ship as far as the per diems, but that is to a point, and I think we need to be mindful of that point and the operating budgets of our regional centers. Any questions, comments? Want to move anything around?
Can I just ask a question? Because I don't know. You're saying we don't have the money, but we can pay mentor. Can we take the money that we would have paid mentor and use? Reading the center? I don't understand it. So.
Well, if those beds were no longer there or elsewhere in the system, but for example, we can't open a building at one of the regional centers, hire the staff, and I mean, let's even say that it's, not a fully populated building, because if it was high management, I don't think I'd want it to be a fully populated building. We put 10, 12 people in it. Well, unless we're going to take 10, 12 beds offline somewhere in the community, that's basically a residential expansion. It's a residential expansion in a regional center, but it's basically a residential expansion. So unless we're moving things that are currently already assigned, whether we open a home or we open a building or we expand an existing building, it's still residential expansion. And so we didn't get new money this year for residential expansion. So if we're going to open new beds, whether it be at the regional center or at a provider.
But if we were going to put that person in mentor, is that an expansion? Or is we're putting someone in a mentor home?
Well, right now it would be, they would have, mentor's frozen, but it would have to be into an existing funded spot at mentor.
All right, so what we're talking about is we have somebody who already has funds, and they're going to go into one of our centers, and that's what I'm wondering. You're basically telling me, oh no, this is going to be new funds, but if we took the freeze off of mentor, then we could slide a couple people in there, 2 or 3 people. You got to explain to me the difference.
Because, let me just jump in.
Jump in and tell me.
Because the money does not follow the person, it sticks with the bed. And that's our problem. And when we send out these critical lists, it should say, this is the column that you have. And a lot of these people on these critical lists are, they're, I won't say they're exaggerated, but their weaknesses are enhanced or their challenges are enhanced because that's how you get them critical. I mean, everybody knows it. But if you added a column out to the side that says, this person runs away a lot and chokes down his food too fast. And then you say, this is the funding that's going to come along with that to meet those needs. And then you had another column that said, these are the counties who this person can choose from. York, Oconee, Spartanburg, whatever. Then the money would follow the person because the person would be choosing, and that's kind of like, more like Georgia does it.
Mhm.
So we need to get ourselves, and I don't know if we need to ask for money to do that, but we need to make a conversion to the money following the person and get out of this. We gotta do it, we gotta put a mentor, because mentor has been, forget whether or not it grows. You see what I'm saying?
This may surprise you, but I'm in 100% agreement with you. If I had a magic, no, I'm serious. If I had a magic wand, I would be like, here you go, and it's assigned to them and figure, there, from a transition point of view, there are some bumps in the road.
I
From
know.
a transition point of view and some of the hardship of providers, but I completely agree with you. I would love to have a system where, here's Johnny, and here's the $100 assigned to Johnny.
Well, a big
Go
first
for it.
step would be to rework the way the format in that critical incident list, critical list.
So, Tom, with regards to the, or David, either one of you might answer this question. With regards to the status of the residential expansion, because you know that's not a light switch, it takes months, sometimes, and they're double-digit months, to get that up and running. Where are we in kind of that continuum as far as, if not heads in bed, promised heads in beds?
Probably got 40 beds, still 40 beds.
Yeah, they're all committed, all the money.
Right, so we've got a
Everybody
head
out
promised
there
for a bed.
Some of those are, some of the beds that David and his district office are developing. 18 beds, we got 9 of them going, right? In some way. And we got various ones that the providers are trying to open up in the next months.
And we got a lot of buildings out with.
So to answer your question, to redirect those, it would require some of those 50 heads that have already been promised to go into a bed to say, we can't go into this bed, you've got to go over here, or it's got to be taking things offline as vacancies occur to redirect them to somewhere else, which kind of goes back to what you were, the address as opposed to the human.
Well, it's not attached. People that are supposed to have choice, which we're worried about final rule, this is where we're going to problem with final rule. But we could say, okay, we've got this nice place at Witten Center, we got this other place over here at Mentor, and you have a choice, which one do you want to live in? Then they'd have a little bit of a choice. They got no choice at this point. You gotta go where the vacancy
They
is.
do. I mean, they can move anytime they want to move, as long as it's a bed where they want to go. And the
Well,
provider has to develop.
But that's
that
the
bed.
problem, sometimes you don't have a long list of
Most
providers.
providers in time will get a bed for them.
That's right, and we got vacancies all over the state, so.
I don't think we're in compliance with final rule. I don't think we're close to getting there.
But we don't have that many vacancies all over the state.
At any given time, we have 70 to 80 of them.
Yeah, one time.
In the community.
But they're all pretty much someone who's, I mean, are there people not going into those beds?
Sometimes the provider chooses to keep it
But
vacant.
sometimes they hold it up because they can't find anybody suitable.
Well, you know,
That the
If they have
money that
suitable
it takes to take care of them is there for them.
right.
I mean, we're embarking, and I think probably in, maybe not by September, but by October, Pat Maley has been spending a lot of time going out and interviewing and talking at a pretty high level of detail with providers out there as kind of a first stroke towards what does the new system need to look like. And so, I mean, at one hand, it would kind of make sense to do it along with that. If there's a time pressure that we want to do something sooner than that, I mean, we can look at changing the system, just understand that there are certain inherent things built in, like the 30-day bed vacancy, the fact that we help with startup, I mean, some of those other things would have to go away. And I'm not even saying that that's fundamentally flawed. We just, if there's a conversation about that, just understanding all of the ripple effects of said conversation. So. But with regards to the regional centers and the funds for both halves of that, because again, our per diems are pretty low. Our staffing patterns there are pretty shoestring. You guys want to leave this on there, adjust it?
Which one are we on?
Number 4.
God, is that all? Help me.
And we didn't get any funding this year,
No, we did not.
the current year ends. The last 3 years prior, we got funding for this initiative, so we don't have anything to help us move people out that raise their hand.
And while we have moved people out that have raised their hand this year, we have not had a significant census reduction. And again, I talked about how
Yeah.
that door that was cracked is now less cracked because we're using them to meet some of the crisis needs. So there's not been a significant census reduction this year.
Well, until we know where we're moving them to
Yeah.
and get that squared away, it's kind of, to me, well, we can ask for it.
Leave it alone.
Just leave it alone.
Okay.
I mean, ask for it, what you ask for, but we're probably not gonna get it anyway.
Well, we got the last 3 years just to get it for the.
How much did they make last year?
We got, we brought to 850,000 in 16, I think, 1 point. So over the 3 years, we probably got like 3 million, is that right?
3 million.
Yeah, about $3 million.
I think this is,
And we changed the rate and changed the MFI formula
And promoted that people come with a plan, a budget that would meet the needs. We take anything. We come up with medical model facilities that have been developed for people that are medically fragile, and we develop those.
Enhanced funding
Enhanced funding for
beyond
that. Right.
the Band R.
Band R.
Okay, number 5 is, which we talked about a little bit earlier, the ICF-IID provider rate increase. So we can adjust that rate without having to take from somewhere else in the system.
I think we ended up with, yes, request that money, and if we get it, we need to make sure we're spending it in the most efficient way possible.
Can I maybe one, because I got the number. We get paid $247 for community assets, $247 a day. 30% is $74. And if you take 74 off, you're at 173. So I don't know if the providers are saying they're only getting paid 173. We're paying them at a band H or a band R, which is, a band R would be, you take off, the one thing that is in the band is the $8.50 bed fee. So that has to be included in the bands, because we got to pull that out and pay the general fund. So it's $251 for a band R and a $227 that we pay them for a band H. So there's no way to be 30%. No way. We get paid $247, 30% is $74. No way we're pulling $74 off of the rate to get it down to 172. We're paying $251 or $227, because either you're a band R or you're a band H.
In most cases, we're paying band R.
Right. So it's not 30%. It could be 10%. Look at the numbers, but it ain't 30%. No
You
way.
think it's 10?
There's no way.
Well, we don't know, because we don't, neither one of us have the, how much the regional center beds?
$410 a day. We get rid of it.
How much admin costs?
It's usually 3 or 4%. That's it. Yeah.
So the 3 to 4% is the admin costs of the regional center ICFs.
Yeah.
But the provider admin costs are higher.
I don't think so. I mean, it's all based on the cost report. It's all how they allocate it down. I'm just saying that 30% is way out of kilter. It's not nowhere close to what you said earlier. I mean, it doesn't match up. So I'm just
No, that's
trying to
true.
get clarity, because I don't understand where you come to 30%, because there's no way we're pulling $74 off the rate that we get.
Well-
We know we're paying the band H and the band R's. Take the 850 off, which is the bed fee. We're paying $227 for the band H, and we're paying net $251 for the band R. And like Dave said, a lot of people coming out, we're paying band R, so we're paying more than we get reimbursed. In some instances, we're paying more out to the board that's handling those beds than what we're getting reimbursed, because it's on the aggregate. It's an average reimbursement. So you got some that are a little more costly, some a little bit less expensive, but on the average, we get $247.
Why don't you take all the time that you need and give us the amounts that you're taking on for each ICF? I'd like to see that.
me too.
Again, that's spending plan. If we get this money, making
If we
sure
ever
we
get
get it.
that spending plan,
If we ever get that, yeah, if we ever get there.
We'll try and speed it up. Okay, so number 6 had 3 components, that had to do with strengthening support, oversight, and system changes. It included the 1.2 for intake. We are still currently this fiscal year, and again, we'll get to this on the spending plan. We're bridging what we're paying the providers for the intake, with one-time funds. We don't have a source of recurring funds for that right now. We had requested 200,000 to just increase training system-wide, and then 250 for oversight. Are you guys wanting to change that? Change numbers, anything like that?
Where are we at with intakes? Right now? And we're asking for $1.2 million, but where is it? What's going on with it?
It's on the spending plan. We, as of last year, had not spent quite as much as we were projecting.
We're projecting right at $600,000, someone that bought 550, 600,000.
What'd you do with those 40 people you hired here? You fired them? The 40
No.
people who were working here doing intake?
We never had 40 people. We had 6 or 7. Some of them, yeah, no. Some of them went into, as a vacancy, because I, wanted to avoid a rift. I don't want to, cost people their jobs. So as we were transitioning, some of them went as a vacancy occurred that they were qualified for, because some of them were previous case managers. They went into that vacancy. Some of them, that's where a lot of them went. Some of the stuff with there's one position that went to the QA component.
We had a waiting list
Yes.
position created, state funded case management.
Yeah, that we were gonna have to do, so they went to elsewhere in the agency, either in new needs or vacancies because somebody left. So we did not do a RIF, but those people aren't like sitting there doing that anymore, so.
Oh, was I correct saying, so we're thinking that the cost is gonna be now 600,000, not 1.2?
We're still seeing it crescendo and go up. I don't know that next year's cost will be 1.2, but I suspect it'll be more than 600. So somewhere between. Because we're still seeing the trajectory go up each month.
And what's left up here now? What is being done centrally versus what's being done by the providers?
Susan, I'm gonna let you,
Just real quick, I don't
So,
want to offend, just real quick.
from what point would you like? to
Yeah.
start? On the screening line.
Okay, green line's still
So we
coming.
have screening, we have the screeners. And then, there's a process for referrals to providers to accept and intake. They do their intake activities, they come right back into eligibility and the eligibility team determines eligibility. So, there's some staff doing kind of QA of the materials submitted by the intake providers that are not community-based to make sure they have what they need and saying, oh, you've missed this, I need this instead. And then, we also have, what else?
Who are the consumers dealing with? Are they dealing with people locally, or are they dealing with people here? Are they dealing with both? It's local.
Local.
Part of the 600,000 is fees we pay for the package that comes in. $175, remember the rates, $175 for the case management, $25 for the EIs.
I will tell you, that's not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing people are feeling like they're bouncing
I am too.
from a lot of different people, but some people here centrally.
Who are they bouncing back and forth from?
That's what I'm saying. They're bouncing back and forth, it feels like, between, there's still not this idea that a consumer goes someplace and they deal sort of with one line for, and if I said one sort of place where they're going to predict, they're going, sometimes they're going to local, sometimes they're referred back here, and it's bouncing back and forth. I'm just, it's anecdotal, I don't have any statistics, okay? But it feels like the objective of, they come here, but then they're referred out and they go to that intake place and they stick with that intake place, is not happening.
Well, we can show you statistics on the number
I-
of take packets
I-
we get, and
yeah.
how many we send out,
Okay,
and how
I
many
mean,
we
I'd
bring
like to
back
see,
in.
I'd like to see
Okay.
where it is, 'cause I will tell you, that's not what I'm hearing.
Okay.
Can I ask, since we have some providers, how y'all doing with the intake? If this is what y'all,
I have a letter from Mr. Rhonda Brown, who did the intake for these people. There's 2 people. This person happened to be the nephew of the person who did all my adoption home studies. So they specifically asked if we would do this. They waited until we actually got intake back.
right,
They were found eligible, they never hit our door. They were eligible from BDSN, through the screening portal. Apparently, if they screen documents in, you automatically do intake for them. So we didn't do a home visit, we didn't do anything with them. Then there was a couple that came from Connecticut. got in touch with people they knew down here, then they got my number, and I've been working with them for 2 years because they were planning their move.
Right.
Very, very careful about their move.
Yeah.
They have 2 sons with autism. They also, and the reason I found out about this is she called me angry at me because my case manager hadn't been there yet. And I'm like, hon, send me
So
what
when
you got.
when-
And she was already eligible for services through DDSN because they scanned in their stuff and
So
But
that's
see-
the self-serve feature that the providers asked us for, that families could do kind of the screening in themselves without having to wait for our working hours. And so if they submit the records and they're the right records, the psychologist review eligibility and it's done really fast.
So that's,
So the family kind of has the control of the pacing because they possess the record. Nobody needs to request them for them, they can just upload them and they're right in.
okay, so they're not doing.
we actually never knew that feature existed until we stumbled on it, that they can actually get eligibility from the scanned records. But be that as it may, they still weren't in touch with our agency. They're told there are 3,000 something on the waiting list, and that's the end of it. And they think they're being supported by me, and they're not. And because I said, do we have a person like, I'm not good with names, but she's not my employee. So she's a DDSN employee. But that's just, and those are 2 people I have been working with for quite some time, waiting for us to get intake back so they have that local touch. And
I guess.
Ralph, how about you?
Yeah.
I just,
Totally different problem. I have written to DDSN and
Okay.
asked for some assistance on this issue. Haven't gotten anything back yet. It's been a few weeks now, about probably 3 weeks.
so you hadn't got anybody in,
We're having trouble getting people in, but the thing is, we've had several people complain to us about they wanted to request us, but weren't given the option to request us. And we recently had somebody actually come to our office and sit there and do everything there. And we weren't among the choices. Sitting in our office.
Silent.
Now, I want to think it's an employee problem.
And,
Okay,
and
I'm hoping it's not a.
just to correct, I mean,
Systems
you've had
problem.
multiple conversations with us about that. I'll
We
let
That was
Susan.
previous.
But
Yeah.
I asked you to get back to me so that I could get more details from you, and I have looked at that, and we have a database. So if an individual is being considered for intellectual disability, there's a filter, and we type in Aiken County, and then a list of 14 providers show up. And so the market, instead of being 1 or 2 intake providers, now we have 14 to choose from.
Oh, I
So that
understand
whole
that,
list
and that's how
gets read
it should
every
be.
time.
That's how it should,
Yeah,
but you're saying it's read every time, and that's what,
it's read every time unless the person says our first choice is Aiken, and then we make them choose 2 more. We request that we have
I understand that.
request they choose 2 more. So in that instance, if they already said we want Aiken, they wouldn't read Aiken again because they'd already chosen Aiken for the first choice, if that makes sense. But the protocol that's written is that they read it every time.
okay, Jerry, how
I
about you?
understand
Since
the
I see 3 people out there.
I'm not knocking the protocol.
How's your,
Not so much intake, the screening process has been a problem for us. We had 16 people pending and only 7, were screened or made eligible. But the screening process down here, and I think I mentioned that at one of the commission meetings, probably a couple of months ago, it still has some holes in it.
And I'll agree with you, we've seen a pretty significant,
thank y'all.
we've seen a pretty significant widening of people who make it through that first gate because of that screening. And I know that we're trying to look at some things while still, I would rather screen more people in than accidentally screen somebody out. But we see at a systems level, the same thing that you're seeing, that now that it was a little bit of that online, we've seen the bubble get bigger. So we're looking at even including possibly, having more live people that can make some of those
We've got an
judgment
update
calls.
ready to go out and how we refine
Yeah,
that.
so but we've seen the same
Yeah.
thing and we agree with you.
Well, I think the other thing too, it's almost like, and I understand there's maybe a learning curve. There shouldn't be, but that's what the people down here have told my folks. Well, there's a learning curve here. There shouldn't be. When somebody calls, they should go through the process. I mean, I think I mentioned it. We were processing people that had asthma because they weren't properly screened. And our people are doing all the work, but they're not getting paid for those that are not made eligible. That's the issue that I'm having.
So let me just clarify that. So if records are submitted by a qualified intake provider, providers are paid. If they're ineligible, they still get paid because they did the work request.
Well, that's not what I've been told.
So
but
that is
I'll-
absolutely
okay,
true.
all right.
Now, if the intake provider submits no records, currently there's not a system for that because. the
No matter
intake
what they're,
wasn't
okay, if
completed.
they're not made eligible, and somebody just needed a wheelchair, or in this case, in one case, the person had asthma. But, you know, our folks got the information back and was going through that process, and they shouldn't have been. They should, if they were screened appropriately, they shouldn't have, you know, come back to us.
So our process is, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to turn this into this, but our process has been that even when the CPR was doing it, is if the family wanted to pursue eligibility, but they had limited ability to tell us if they really had an intellectual disability or the nature of the brain injury or a motor vehicle accident with pre-existing condition, they still wanted to go through that, we allowed for that. And so what you're seeing an effect of that happening because, you know, over time, people become kind of like armchair psychologists and feel like they can kind of, okay, well, that's never going to qualify you, so I don't think you should go through this process. We've really opened it up. So if somebody, I mean, believe it or not, if somebody has asthma and they have so many asthma attacks that they have limited oxygen access, they can have some brain impact and potentially they can have an intellectual disability.
No, I
So those
understand.
are weird situations that don't come up very often, but we have not told families you may not pursue eligibility. And so we're trying to do a good job of educating them that it might not be likely, but there are some oddball cases like that might come out where it's just as simple as.
And I've gotten way, and I'm sorry, I apologize for this, I've gotten way, way, way off the budget side of things. I appreciate Susan, all the information. I appreciate all the information from you guys. I'm sorry if you're taking us this far off track. I do feel like I would say at some point now we need to close the loop on where we are with intake, because there's some things that are due, there's some things we still need to work on. But I'm gonna shut up because that's not related to the budget request.
Well, I'm still not clear on why we need $1.2 million more on intake, which basically what is training. So I have a friend who's a case manager who said, yeah, I had to go through the training and I did something else while it was on and it just, you know, let it play out. Because she considers herself to be a seasoned case manager. But, you know, I'm just wondering if that's really necessary, and have we talked with providers about what they think their needs are as far as training? That's a lot of training money.
That training is not directly related to intake at all.
It's number two, isn't it?
I understand that, but
Yeah,
it's not intake training.
That's a product of lumping.
That's-
Remember, we lumped a lot of stuff together last year, so that training is
Oh,
for other
okay,
stuff.
what is it for then?
So for the agency to be able to increase training opportunities in general, whether it be us bringing in subject matter experts, the agency doing more, having a payment mechanism to help support the providers to do more peer-to-peer training, all of the above. That's what that is,
Just
training
number-
in general.
Just number two.
I got it.
Number
I'm
one,
with
the
you
number
now.
one was 1.2.
So what is the 1.2?
It's paying for the services of actually doing the intake.
The
We pay, you do an intake, we pay you $175.
And we have not seen, it did not cost that much this year, but we are seeing a steady crescendo.
In other words,
So
that's
I
actually
think by-
payment for services.
That
That $1.2 million is payment for services performed by the
Payment
provider.
to whom? The provider?
The provider.
Providers.
The $175 per completed intake
How are they
package.
being paid now to do intake? They're not volunteer, are they?
Yeah, we're using that one time. Basically, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. We're using funds that come in at that whole.
Where's Peter's money at?
It's coming, remember, we have one-time funds that are generated, when monies are allocated, and they start coming into the bank, but they're not spent, you know, because it's those one-time funds. It's that bridge funds that we did in the past. That hasn't changed as far as source, because they didn't give us any money for this. So it's not really, Peter doesn't exist. Where we're robbing from is the theory of Peter existing.
Right.
Okay, because if Peter in theory exists, there's no actual Peter, but because Peter in theory exists, certain monies come in to our system, and we use those monies to bridge this gap. So we're robbing from the theory of Peter to pay for Paul's intake. Would that be an accurate description? A one-time funds?
Well, what are we gonna do with all that?
Well,
What are we gonna do with all that extra money that we have?
we used it to pay for this, I mean, it's not huge.
I know, but we're asking for this to be paid for.
We're asking for this to be paid by recurring
Another
funds.
way.
By recurring funds. In other words, something that really is, this money comes in and from the outset is designated for the intake of Paul and John and George and Rico and everybody else. That's the difference between recurring funds.
All right, have we discussed that?
Do we need to leave that at 1.2 or are we adjusting that?
I mean, we can ask.
Again, yeah, we're asking. It's a separate issue whether we're doing it. The way
Think
that
we need to-
want it to be.
We need to consult with people about what they feel like their training needs are, like any kind of.
And then, yeah, that trade's a separate thing from what the whole intake. Again, I'm asking that question from staff's.
I think
advice,
given that we're
maybe
talking
it's
about
okay.
2019.
Yeah.
And we are seeing a steady, even though it's under what we projected for this year, the incline is like this, but I think I would leave it alone.
Okay, that was my.
Do you agree, Tom?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Now, this oversight,
Sorry. No, we can do that.
what is that?
They'll tell me to shut up.
Clinical physicians to focus on outcome measures.
Right, that's the additional, we ramped up and tried to increase some within our existing resources, particularly like we've done a lot this year to focus on high management and increased reviews of high management. If we want to really increase that system-wide, we're not going to be able to do too much more with the existing resources that we have, and it'll require additional resources. So that's what that's related to.
No need to talk about genetics. They're gonna get that $500,000.
That's.
All right.
I can bitch about it as much as I like, but it ain't gonna happen. So let's go on to numbers.
All right.
Thank goodness they don't ask for more than
Yeah.
$500,000.
And post-acute rehab, last year was one of the first years that we haven't received any. Probably over a decade ago, the assessed need for this across the state was estimated to be over 10 million. And so I have no doubt that that number has gone up just because of inflation. So the agency years ago kind of decided that they wanted to start this program. And again, this is 100% state dollars, serving those folks who are underinsured or don't have insurance, and we do not use Medicaid for this. So 500, depending on the severity of the injury, it allows us to expand another 8 to 10 people. And so we're not meeting the needs now, and we've got the bar set really, really high so that we can, have money stretched. But sometimes if you happen to have an injury in May, you're kind of out of luck because we're out of money. Because it's just what's available. So that's just continuing that effort. And then last year's last one, which as a staff recommendation, I would recommend the commission consider possibly moving up the priority of this item. This is related to final rule. When we heard feedback from the public sessions, this was a much higher priority than number 9. We've got supported employment and supporting employment opportunities in here, and things required to move towards compliance with the new final rule, with employment being the biggest piece of it, but other pieces as well. And so I think it definitely needs to be on there, and I would recommend consideration of moving it as a higher priority.
So where do you want to move it?
If you look at the feedback that we received, employment was the second priority that was talked about from folks, and general compliance with final rule was the 4th. And so I think as far as service delivery and challenges facing our service delivery system, final rule should be way up there.
That moved to 4.
Number 4.
That's 4 moving to 4. Based on feedback.
Okay? Staff can work that up and y'all can.
But that's me. I'm not, that's just,
I
We
did.
move,
Okay.
That's good.
move, yeah,
All right.
9 to 4, and then
Okay.
everything else is moved down.
All right, so a couple things that are not a few things that are not reflected on here that we talked about was, we heard at the public sessions, one-time funds for home building and vehicle maintenance. So I don't know, that lots of state agencies ask for one-time funds. We historically have not done a whole lot of that, but there could be a specific one-time funds as opposed to recurring funds, request on behalf of the agency. And then the two items that Tom talked about at the beginning of the environmental modifications, which we did hear a little bit about at public comment, and then the pest control being added to the waiver. HASKI waiver. You guys want to include that somewhere? And if so, where?
Is this one-time money you're talking about now?
The home, vehicle, and building would be one time. The HASKI and the pet or pest control would be reoccurring, and the vehicle modifications would be recurring. Because once you change the cap's changed. So it's gonna be recurring.
The pest control services, are they being required or just something that's been? Are the feds saying?
Well, we have it in most of the waivers in South Carolina, so
Right.
HASKI's the only waiver really.
It doesn't happen. But the feds aren't saying you need to put that in. I'm trying to think where we might slot it.
State
Okay.
option. They're recommending that we put it in. It kind of would fit in there with number two, I think, put it in there as part of the, that's related to the waiting list and expansion of service.
We'd have to add, we can, but we'd have to add language about, increasing individual services available within the waiver to blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But I agree, I think as long as we change the language, it could be included.
We're talking 300,000 for the pest control and 400 for the
So that's gonna
environmental
be in number two.
modifications.
Yeah, 700, Tom, is that correct for those two?
So,
And we would probably use language like add additional services too, as opposed to something really specific. But that would be 700 under that line. But
For the vehicle and home, modifications or improvements or updates or whatever, are we talking about for providers?
yes. For their fleet management, their homes, their day program buildings. So, and we do a little of that each year, but what we, just with existing funds within our budget, you guys have approved stuff like that. This is kind of asking for a larger scope of being able to do it. So,
Well, my concern is, or if we ask for it and if by some miracle we should get it, are we gonna do that with it? And I say that because we still have $9.5 million in the capital improvement account. And every year we approve over $2 million worth of capital improvement projects. And every year we only spend $1.7 million in capital improvement projects. So
different process.
the process is a lot easier.
whatever process it is, last fall I brought it up and the account has grown.
Talking about this 500, whatever this millions we asked for, this one thing.
Whatever y'all
it's in the process.
Well, this capital improvement thing is not our strong suit as far as getting it out and getting it
Getting the money
done.
out.
So if we do it,
It would be through grants to the provider. It would not be through that process. If we received, let's say, $1 million.
so they would actually get it.
Correct. So we would send them out a grant that said with the parameters, you must use this money within the following blip. And then they would use it and we can get it out a lot faster and they don't have to jump through all the hoops that state agencies have to jump through. So that's part of the difference. So we could get it out there very quickly and they could utilize it as long as they're consistent with procurement or whatever. They can utilize it faster because they do not have to jump through all those same hoops.
Well, it's worth asking. I know they need it.
What dollar amount are you thinking and what priorities?
Well, we were told was 300,000 for pest control and 400,000 for environmental modification.
Right, that was, now we're talking about environmental.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, because that's.
You're talking about the one-time fund.
Correct.
Okay.
That environmental mod is reoccurring,
Yeah.
I said you asked 5 million, hope you get 2 million.
That's what I would do. Well, let's ask for 5 million.
And one-time funds is a different pot of money, so in the sense that they look at it
I
differently.
mean, the worst thing,
we're going to just slot it in that same section. What happens? Put another category under number two.
It's not a whole
for
set
what
of
happens.
So it would be our one and only priority for for, they don't really have to, I'm looking at y'all as far as,
they have a package for.
Okay.
Yeah.
so one-time funds.
Yeah.
Buildings,
Please.
day, residential, and vehicles. And this would apply to the community provider network and whatever portion will be applied to the regional grid. Okay, what about the 3% reduction plan? Do we have copies of that? Here it is. This is what you guys approved last year, and we're anticipating a small, because of the 9 million that we received, and then for the adjustments in the insurance and all of that fun stuff, we're anticipating that 7,156,268 to go to somewhere between 7.4 and 7.5. Again, they have not given us the exact number, but this is how you guys prioritized it in percentages last time. Do you want to make any changes, or do you just want us to kind of go with these percentages and update them with the new total dollar amount?
I think that sounds like a wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah,
I think the plan, substantially not changed since then.
yeah.
All right, cool. That was easy peasy. All right. And last but not least is that additional requirement that's new for this year, which has to do with the reducing cost and burden to businesses and citizens. Right behind that. One more. And again, this is new. I don't think there's anything that stands out and glares at us. I mean, we don't have to make a recommendation at all. There's some things, I know I had with the childcare centers. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But how does that fit into here? Am I just crossing in my head? So.
That's Mr. Mosley.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, I just don't think, we don't really charge, I mean, there's the ICF bed fee, but I mean, I don't know that we're not like DHEC. We don't charge fees. We don't charge, licensor, all of these different things that some of the other state agencies that has a burden on businesses. I don't know that we have anything legislatively. Now, we have some things that we do internally, but that's not legislatively that's codified. So, I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that's really pressing, but obviously I didn't want to make that decision without talking to you guys.
Are they talking about legislatively?
Yes.
They're not talking about what we could do.
Right, because if it's something that we have the autonomy to do ourselves, we can just do it ourselves. Because like for other agencies, they've got the fees or the rates for utilities or all these different things are set by the General Assembly. So if there was a recommendation to decrease a fee, this would be where you would put it. If there was a recommendation to add a fee for something, in this case, they're wanting to reduce. So they're not wanting to hear additions. They're wanting to hear reductions. And since our agency is a service delivery agency and not really a fee and fine regulatory agency, it doesn't really apply to us as much.
It's like where the DMV charges $100 for
Exactly.
a license. They wanted to do away with that. They'd
Yeah.
say,
Or to reduce it or whatever, yeah. So.
Well, I don't know. I still think we ought to look at our efficiency as well.
Right, I mean, yeah, it
I don't know
doesn't
that it
include us
means
from,
that it's just about fines and fees,
right. Well, and I think that as an agency, we can continue to do that, but that's not necessarily part of the budget request because we're not asking them to do something. It would be you as the governing body deciding to do something. So that's the difference. So, I mean, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that would be pushing, but again, I didn't want to make that decision all by myself. Needless to say.
eliminate the commission in front of cabinet. I think that would be good.
we don't charge a fine or a fee for service here.
Well, Gary, now you get travel.
That's not a fine or a fee.
No, but it's not, but it's, save the taxpayer.
So based on any instructions we've received, I can't,
No, I don't know.
I'm looking at the two of them because they have conversations with the budget staff.
I don't know about
I mean, that's, again,
That's not anything I know about.
Okay.
DNR
You
charging
didn't tell me I
people
had
licenses
that.
for money. It's all these other, there's a lot of other agencies that operate their budgets off of user fees.
Right, and we don't. That's why I really don't think it's applying to us. I just didn't want to, I wanted y'all to have that conversation first. Okay, we will work up in whatever fashion before tomorrow, the, changes that you guys have made so that you can officially do whatever you're gonna do tomorrow on this, so. Then after that is the spending plan. If that's okay with you, Chairman?
Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, you got, 3 documents to look at and discuss. The first one is the, taking the base expenditures, basically the commission approved contract, community contracts that were done back in June, the 535.8 million, and then, adding in the regional center and, community program service, areas like autism, things like that, into that, $106 million, and then admin of 8.9, for base expenditures, being right at $651 million. Then below that are new dollars that we expect to come in, and like we've been talking about, one thing we got this past year was the new dollars, was the 9 million state fund for the pay increase for the direct pay workers, and a little bit of money that we've estimated in here for fringe benefits related to healthcare and retirement. So that's the 25.3 million there in statewide expenditures that we've already passed out to provide for the pay raise, for the $1 or for the 89-cent pay raise, and we're still waiting on the final numbers for the fringe increases that we will pass on to the provider network sometime in September, October, we get the number. So we estimated here it to be about $2 million, and we're showing for in ICF regional centers, we're not showing any movement of people into the community, or it's a net decrease in the population at the regional center. So we have some movement, but we have people coming back in. So it's basically a zero impact on dollars leaving the regional centers to going to the community. And then capital needs, we've got 2 lines there for required maintenance and things like that, and provider network, 3.2 million. And then the debt service, statewide debt service account, so we're expecting to spend in that account about $2 million in 18. So total of the expenditure plan right now is right for the expenditures or budget expenditures that we're projecting right at $682 million. And then next sheet is the revenue sheet, showing how we're going to fund that projected expenditure level, and shows our different funding sources of funds that we receive from different components. State appropriations, that's the 249 million at the base expenditures that were appropriated just from General Assembly for us for the current fiscal year back in July 1 when the new year started. $2 million for state allocation for employee share of retirement health is what we're projecting there as estimate right now. State carryover of state funds from 17 into 18 is 900,000. State carryover funds from PPP program, that's about 2.2 million. And then carryover funds for other funds, 3.5, and then we get down to the Medicaid. We're estimating about $417 million in revenue from the Medicaid earnings that will generate by billing for residential services and day services and case management, EI, and all the other components in our system of bill Medicaid for service delivery to our consumer population. EI and then other funds, total of $683.3 million in total revenue. You see some notes down here. We're estimating or projecting that we're going to be sending some money to HHS somewhere during the year of the 249 million. That first line back up there related to BabyNet or to the PED program. BabyNet, somewhere this year we'll start moving money over to them for BabyNet programs. I say the lead agency now for that BabyNet program in South Carolina, and the PED program, like you know, is fading away, and then state plan service for autism is coming into play. The waiver is going out of effect by December, so we'll start moving money as they incur allocations of expenditure with the money with that in the year, and then permanently transfer in 2019 $2 million that we would send over to HHS to the autism program. And the baby net money is 3.725 that we would move to them sometime this year or permanently move over in 2019.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that just a little bit. I know that there's at least a likelihood that it'll be codified as far as moving it over. For those of you that have been on the commission for a while, if you'll remember, in previous legislative sessions when First Steps was the lead agency, they tried to get the money appropriated underneath them. DDSN was not supportive of that and legislatively tried to speak another option. That does not apply as much now that DHHS is the lead agency. DHHS will also be engaging in probably as quickly as sometime in September. So this may end up being an agenda item for you guys in September. But in flipping the switch from some of their child find activities and identifying a whole lot more children that are currently on the Medicaid rolls that are not getting BabyNet services. And so they would want to streamline, and that's one of the benefits of having that lead agency moving, streamlining a lot of those processes so that BabyNet can better utilize Medicaid and maximize those additional dollars. Well, part of that is rough, fat numbers. We're anticipating another like 2,000 kids that whenever they flip that switch are all of a sudden going to be enrolled in BabyNet. And right now, DDSN gets built for those services for those kids that are eligible for our populations. And so 2 years ago, 3 years ago, don't quote me on that, School for the Deaf and Blind transferred their money over to what was First Steps and now to BabyNet. And so as opposed previously when, as an agency, we were concerned about having the money go over and we're not supportive of that, there's some logistics that have to be worked out, which is why it's not an agenda item for you guys to evaluate tomorrow. But at some point, it is highly likely that we will either this year voluntarily, if you guys approve it, or be told by the General Assembly at some point in a future date to transfer that money. We are line itemed some of that, but the agency for years has spent above and beyond that line item amount because just very supportive of the prevention efforts and the bang for your buck and serving kids early. And so there may be some negotiation about what the dollar amount is, if it's the total dollars spent or the line item or somewhere in between. But I may be asking you at some point to, in the middle of this fiscal year, voluntarily send a certain amount over. But right now I need a little bit more details and we need to work out some of the logistics with DHHS. So it's premature for me to ask you guys that, but kind of giving you a heads up from the spending plan, it's probably going to be coming even this year, and we may be told to do it next year. So.
This PPD money, how much do we have left over from last year?
We carried forward 2.25. And that's because of lack of enrollment in that waiver, provider availability, that whole circle.
And that's all? So from fiscal year 2017?
Correct.
Okay.
And that's the number we had at, it might go down a little bit, if we get more bills, it comes out to 17, but that's the number we had at the July that we thought we were going to carry forward. It might go down to 5,000.
So what are we going to do with that? We're going to give all that back to HHS?
Well, the balance, yeah.
Well, based on conversations that I've had, and again, this is a proviso that was put in for us, that if the agency wants to use some of that, particularly the conversations that I've had are about the Grow Your Own Provider Network, some of that training that we're paying for them to go through those 5 ABA classes so that they can be certified and help with some of the supervision, 6 classes, okay, used to be 5. And some of those supervision requirements, that if the agency wants to retain some of those one-time funds to continue that effort, that there would be support for that. But above and beyond that, it needs to go to DHHS to help support and pay for the new autism state plan, both in the one-time carry forward, and then there's a proviso that instructs us as kids exit to transfer it to them on a quarterly basis.
So how much training, how much money
I mean, it's not too expensive.
Couple hundred thousand.
to keep for training? You want to keep that for training?
And again, it's just one time, so it would finish the cohort we have.
And what are we doing to try to get their rates up? Because I know some girl was telling me she was gonna move to North Carolina because the rates were so much higher there. I know we've discussed that in the past, but we hadn't talked about that
For the
today.
autism state funded services, those rates, so DHHS controls that and has indicated that they have to look over time at the service utilization and for people involved, and once they have a critical amount of information, they haven't said how much, they'll look at possibly increasing the rate, but that'll have to be answered with additional funding from the General Assembly. So essentially, they'll have a request
So,
that they'll be submitting, saying, we need to increase the rate, as you all have heard, and so they'll ask for money.
so we can't ask for money now, so we have,
It's their program now.
We can be supportive of it.
Yeah.
And from an advocacy
I
perspective.
understand, yeah.
But we are.
One way to go. We told them at the outset they need to put more money in.
Oh,
Well,
Well, we've been very about that we understand there's a provider shortage and that they
And
need.
it seems what happens, is we train them and then they leave.
Okay, so we're carrying over 3.5 million.
yeah, you look on one time, you look on the next page.
And last year, we carried over like 800,000. According to the information we have. So we're carrying over a lot more money.
This year,
Yeah.
Yeah. Last year we carried over 800,000. This year we're carrying
That's
3.5
what-
I
that's
million.
think we carried over a little bit more than that. We put 5 million in a separate account for us to protect for future Medicaid settlement. So it's 5 million on top of 800,000, whatever you said. But, there's another 5, and it's disclosed, well, it's on the Marks, that's on the financial page, but we put 5 million aside for potential settlements. So
Because we are, I mean, I wanted to talk about this either today or tomorrow or both.
Well, you did that too this year.
Well, you guys still have to approve what we're doing this year.
asking-
This is
we're
staff
asking for some
recommendation.
money, 2 million in there for, we need to continue, we're a heavily funded, Medicaid agency, that we have invested heavily in Medicaid. And if you look at 1% factor in rates, for us is about $4 million. That's one, we draw about $400 million a year, 1% up or down rates. And we don't have but one way to get settlements now. We used to have cost settlements that go either way. If we did get funded appropriately, and our expenses were more, then they would pay us for that. That's gone away. They've taken that out of the settlement process. Only way it's a settlement is when we have more reimbursement than our cost justified, we got to pay that up. So we don't have the balancing of us over costing numbers to what the rate is. So we have to have money set aside because there's going to be issues as we move forward into getting all our cost reports caught up. As you know, we're 4 years behind in getting our cost reports finalized because of this issue with the methodology we're waiting on CMS to finalize. Getting closer, but still hadn't finalized. So 1% is 4 million. That's just, common sense, I guess, to have 1%. HHS, they're keeping aside 3 to 4% of their money for rainy day fund for settlements and things that come up. So they got almost $300 million sitting there for potential Medicaid settlements. Of course, they're $6 billion entities. So we're saying that we need to have some money set aside for the future. As all these cost reports get finalized here probably next year, we're gonna see these cost reports being finalized. They're gonna be tabulating them, and we're gonna have some situations where we're gonna owe a little bit of money back because the rates might be higher than the cost. So we need to protect for that, and improve it. And that's what we're suggesting, that 2 million that Mr. Thomas talked about. The 5 million we did last year, you continue to start putting money aside for potentiality of possible settlements.
Now, you've been allowed to carry money over every year for the waiting list that you haven't used for the waiting list from previous years, right? You've had to carry over money.
Well, we use most of it on one-time initiatives. Commissioner Ravenel asked about the 9 million a week or two ago. We spent almost 8 point something million of that on one-time issue, 8.9. So as we got 13 million back in 2015, we identified how much we thought we were gonna spend on ongoing services in that year, and then we identified how much was left over at one time. We identified 9 million, and we put different initiatives against that 9 million to spend it on.
One-time funds, well, this is my question.
Capacity growth and stuff like that.
And y'all, I know y'all think I'm typical on this waiting list, but you know, it just kills me when someone, I go to their house and there's a child sitting there. If they gave us $13.4 million to spend on the waiting list, we never voted on it, not spending all of it on the waiting list. So I know I would have a hissy fit. Why did you all of a sudden decide to spend almost $9 million on these infrastructure, as you call them? I mean, you know, we should have voted on that. I mean, you know, anything over 200,000.
I mean, it was all.
It was voted on by the commission.
Huh? It was in this, don't
Well,
tell me it was in the spending plan. That drives me crazy. Why, and y'all know how it is. Why wasn't it brought up? Because the legislature, and the reason is, I just was at a cocktail party, and the guy told me, he's in the legislature, he said, we gave y'all the money, even quit bitching about the waiting list. And I wanted to say, then I said, you know, if I start really going after him and saying, we didn't spend that money on the waiting list, we did it on infrastructure. He said, if you told me to vote on it, and I voted on it. So I said, I think I need another drink. I laughed because, and this is somebody who votes on our thing, you know, he said, you told me, and because I called him, he lives right down the street. I said, you've got to vote on this and da, 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 da. Well, you tell me, it's in the spending plan, it's in the spending plan. But
It was one-time money.
it was, I know, but one-time money that we were supposed to spend on the waiting list.
As those people got enrolled, we got services.
But when we spent $4 million on it, you know, I don't know, it drives me crazy that we don't really understand, because you always say, if I hear it one more time, say, it's in the spending plan. That's crazy,
Okay, well, let me back up a little bit.
you know,
Let me
I'm
use
mad
this-
about it.
Let me use this year as an example. This year, we got $9 million for direct care staff increases. That is it's a light switch. We can just flip that switch and in one day, or at least a series of 2 or 3 days, amend the contracts and get that out, and the money is out there and being spent effective July 1st. It was a one-time act, and it was simple, and it was, here you go. When you have money, regardless whether it's 13 million, 6 million, you know, when everybody, or as far as that expansion ramping up, is not enrolled in services and spending money on July 2nd. You heard at the conference, at the forum, how sometimes they go through 3 and 4 times.
Right.
And so we, because of historical information, can estimate, even though we got 13 million this year, because of how long it takes to get people enrolled and the average time, that we will only spend on reoccurring services 4 million of that, and we will lapse 9 million because some of those people are enrolled on June 30th, not July 2nd. And so that's how those one-time funds are created. And the commission at that time, there's a sheet where they articulated out the one-time funds that were created from the rollout, how those were going to be used, many of which ticked and tied with supporting the providers in getting that enrollment process. We have a lot less one-time funds this year because the one budget item that we received was something we could flip a switch on and get it out there immediately. Waiting list reduction efforts are not immediate. Residential development is not immediate. By default, you're going to create one-time funds. I mean, it's not humanly possible. The provider network can't do it, and we can't do it. We tried to streamline that process, but there's just no way you're going to spend all of that money on July 2nd like you can when it's a rate increase or a pay raise. And so one-time funds are created, and the commission approved how those one-time funds were to be used in the various ways.
And 5 million of it was to help with the developing residential homes for the 200 people we got into. You have beds out there, you had to go create.
I understand that,
And then they programs need to be expanded too, so.
But you're not taking people, you know, you still have people.
Well, you had to create the beds.
Yeah,
Would it be possible to not, that 3.5 million, is it not possible we're not planning on any expansion this year at all?
No.
We didn't get any.
But yet we're
Other
rolling
than
over
recruiting.
$3.5 million. Could we not use some of that 3.5 million for the waiting list?
No, because it's reoccurring, that's one-time funds. So you'd be giving somebody services for 6 months and then next month, oh, sorry, we don't have reoccurring funds.
Now, I understand what one-time
So-
funds is, but when we roll it over, because we didn't spend it on
Then
the
it-
waiting
then
list then, when it would have become recurring, it now is one time.
Correct. But if that person with the funds that were allocated, if that person got enrolled on June 1st, then they would have only spent 1 month worth of 12 months worth of services. And so that created 11 months worth of one-time funds. But at the beginning of that next fiscal year, they're enrolled in services and they're spending that on a reoccurring basis. So once you actually get them enrolled with those reoccurring funds with that slot expansion, then the money is being used.
In other words, the theory of Peter stopped becoming a theory of Peter. I mean, that's.
Because now we have Peter.
Peter exists, it's not theoretical.
Okay,
So
I
we
want
have
to
to
get to something
spend data.
on the one-time funds. And it is the recovery of funds associated with self-directed care options. We are attempting to collect this money after the fact. And we haven't collected it in the past, is that right?
It's it's been in existence for what, 3 years?
I mean,
This new option that was expanding, when did we start expanding?
well, when the waiver expansion effort
Yeah.
took place. So it was it's a phenomenal of the expansion efforts that more families are selecting, well, case managers are putting it out there and they're selecting it as an option. And so it was very minor used in 13, 14, 15, and in 16 it ballooned up, and then in 17 it just expanded exorbitantly to $2 million impact. So it's a self-directed program where the families choose their caregivers to do in-home supports for the community support waiver or adult day attendant care for the ID waiver. It's more, the most expansion has been in the community support waiver where families selecting that for their child because they can't get respite or they can't get any other services, they select that. So they control the hiring and firing. of that
But
caregiver.
you're asking the providers to pay it back for last fiscal year.
Yeah, we paid it out in the bands. We gave it to them in a band I, and the expenditures were paid by Jasper as our self-directed secondary payor. So we paid them, and so now we paid it out twice. So the provider had the money in the bands. So if we don't get it back from them, then we overpaid the service. We paid it twice. We don't have to wait, because they have all the money in the bands to take care of the individual need of that person's care. So they're the financial manager.
All right, now Charles Lee does the same service, is that right?
That's for respite.
Okay, and what is this? This is not for respite.
This is in-home supports for the community support waiver. That's
Okay.
a different service.
Okay,
And it's a adult day attendant care on the ID waiver,
how much are we paying Jasper to do that?
about $150,000.
That's the administrative cost, the rest of it is service
Service
cost.
cost, yeah.
Okay, so if you're a provider and the case manager authorizes a certain amount of service, they kind of keep an eye on their budget and they know what they can't exceed the band rate. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
Yeah,
You heard?
The author, well, unless somebody did something wrong and authorized over the amount, which.
Right, all right.
Yeah.
So-
But the
But what they
authorized
did-
amount can't go over the waiver cap.
It's the cap waiver.
All right, but the provider that uses Jasper to do the payroll, they're not keeping up with what they've authorized?
Jasper keeps up with that.
Jasper keeps up with it. Did Jasper notify these people throughout the year that, that they were gonna be over budget, over the cap rate?
There's no way you go over.
They can't go over the authorization.
They go based on authorization, so it's no way that they can go over budget. If they do, by accident or whatever, then we would correct that error. But 99% of the time, they can't go over the authorized budget.
Well, I just don't think it's fair to go backwards and say, we're gonna change the rules now. We haven't been collecting it, but now we're gonna start. And then we're gonna start taking it for this year, and then we're gonna start taking it back, so it's a double bang.
It's reconciling our books.
Well, I mean, it's gonna significantly impact some providers though, is it not?
No, it's only four. Four of them have a significant impact. There's 27 that have participated in this program. The financial providers, so only the boards is being affected by, because they're the financial managers for us for that particular county. So they manage the money for those individuals. So in my way of thinking, they should be looking to see what's going on. We're giving them $14,000 a year, and if they don't see any services going on or nothing's hitting that account for that individual, they should say, what's going on? Why am I getting $13,000 and I got no expenditures coming against it? So this is just reconciling what we already paid out for what's been expended for care for that individual. So
That's kind of easier to keep up with, though, if you're doing it in your own county, if you're managing it in your own county. If Jasper's managing it for you, you know, where's that communication as far as reports on?
it's in the reports. They can pull the information and get the information off RTD's reports.
Well, they probably would have if they know they were going to have to pay back some money.
Well,
Well,
And this is very similar to the process that we have for services that are direct billed to Medicaid, that we then have to go and claw it back from the provider because they were given that band payment. And so we've got to go back, okay. Reconcile.
How much is Babcock going to have to pay? $850,000.
yeah, we would work with them to make sure it doesn't have any kind of financial
Yeah, I'll take it all
stress to
the time.
them. We've already talked to them. We've talked to Ralph's another one that's a little bit high on that, because they've chosen it. I mean, their case managers have chosen that service. Or they're, and like I said, there's 9 or 10 boards, or sure they're not, so this way it's working on. Case managers haven't chosen that service for them.
Y'all, this is another example of us looking back and then changing the rules on what happened
No,
back
it's
when.
not changing the rules. It's all part of the
Well, yeah, it is,
process.
you haven't been collecting it now.
It's in the
you are.
capitated band. It's in the
Where's
band.
Babcock gonna get the $850,000? If they had known
It's
about it
in-
in advance, they could have,
It's in
you
the
know,
funds. that they-
reduced costs somewhere.
It's in the funds they receive.
Oh, God. I just don't think this is right.
It's
I
just like
mean,
we
I
do.
really object to us putting that in there and doing that to these people. And changing and we haven't been collecting it back. We're gonna start collecting it back now, but we're gonna back it up to last fiscal year. Why are we doing that to these
It's a
people?
$2 million impact.
I know, on them.
We don't have the $2 million.
I think you do.
I mean, it's a gas.
I don't think they have it either.
They got, the board's got $46 million based on 16 financials.
Well,
The band system has worked well for them. The capitated system has worked well.
oh, no, I think you get an argument.
Well, financially, it worked. They got money to bank. And this is just reconciling the money that we gave them and the bands to what's been expended.
Some of these providers are barely hanging on. We saw last year when we looked at how much money they got in the bank. Some of them don't have enough money to operate for 3 months.
We don't either. We ain't got enough money to operate on a month. It's a service delivery system we're in.
Well, no, you're a state agency. They're not state agencies.
We don't,
You know,
we don't have
y'all-
that kind of,
I really don't think we should be doing this way. I don't think this is fair to go back and look, you know, to ask Babcock or anybody else to come up with, that $850,000 seems like a lot when you haven't been collecting it, and now all of a sudden you're gonna say, okay, now we're gonna collect it. That's just maybe moving forward so that maybe they will start looking at what they're authorizing and they won't go over their budgets, but not looking back, not like this.
it's not going with budget. It's within the dollars that they got.
Well,
Now, we know some providers knew this was coming because they called us and we were trying to work on a solution with our IT people to come up with a report so we could identify it. So we know some providers knew this was coming and were preparing for it. Now, some evidently have not known about it and we're not tracking it. So we understand that. We would not, as we said in the memo, we would not try to take it back at too rapid of a pace to put anybody in harm's way. We would not.
we'll hear from Ralph on that.
All right. Ralph, can we hear what you think about this?
I was, Tom initially told me, I understand the process, but it's a practice that had gone on for a while.
What's a while? I'm sorry.
Could
What's a
you
while?
do me a favor? Could you explain what the situation is? Because I didn't really understand it. Okay, explain the situation.
is,
So
we get
everybody
a
else-
funding bank.
Right,
And we keep saying, and I keep hearing that we authorize these services.
right.
Well, basically, in our case, most of these services were put on the plans by another agency, not by our agency, not by TDC nor ACB. They put it on there. And now all of a sudden, we are stuck with the bill. You know, what they're saying, makes, I'm not saying it doesn't make sense, because they're saying, oh, well, it was in those individuals' funding bands. Should have been in their funding bands. Well, I can tell you, we're in the red because of these kind of things and by CFS, and suddenly hit by surprise. I mean, if they had never been doing this, why should we all of suddenly expect to be hit double hard in this current fiscal year? I mean, it's just, you know, it's a big surprise.
Can I ask a question? Just because I was explained that you received money for services that you didn't provide, is that correct?
No.
You received a band payment,
We
and that's,
received, now, I did say we received the band payment.
okay, within that band payment is supposed to be the services as authorized by that case manager. That case manager authorized,
Who is not our case manager.
it's the individual's case manager,
Yeah.
and that is the individual's band budget. And so those services were authorized by that case manager. And unless something went awry, we're not talking about
And we're not
service.
supposed to limit them or
Exactly.
anything else.
So
And
as
it's
long
not
as it
case
didn't go
manager.
over, as long as it didn't go over that authorized budget, you were paid for those services as the fiscal manager. Somebody else provided those services, just like if it was a direct bill to Medicaid and we go back and get from you as the financial manager, payment for those services out of the band, correct?
Well, that's the unbeauty of the band system, not just the band system, but the financial manager component.
And I agree with you, as we continue, you gave the example of not my case manager that, well, but not my case manager that authorized it, somebody else. So I agree with you, as we move towards where more people touch in person, having the board be the financial manager continues to increasingly be problematic, which is why I think we need to look at something different.
Just like we're putting off ICFs, because we're talking about fiscal year 2019 now, and that's the situation that we're finding ourselves in. Not that everybody doesn't see that these things need to be fixed.
Okay.
I'm not knocking that.
But when it
It's
comes
just
to
how long.
But when it comes to $2.3 million, system-wide, we paid through the financial managers, the boards, that amount of money for those services that were provided by somebody else other than the financial manager. We are doing what we've done with other services. It was a small enough in the past that we didn't do this. We're like, this will just be a bonus to the boards. Great. $2.3 million is not a bonus anymore. I mean, it's not,
But you never
it's not a
said
couple hundred,
this
it's not
is
a,
a bonus to the boards, it was just your practice. It was
and
just
I
your
agree with that.
practice.
I agree with that. But our practice
This was a
in lots of
surprise.
other stuff.
Your practice went back is going back retroactively now, and that's what I have a problem with.
And I can understand that. I mean,
Yeah.
I can.
I mean, it was-
But I want the commission to understand this $2.3 million was paid to the board system for services that the board did not incur the cost for those services. Someone else did. Correct? And those services were
We did.
authorized.
We did.
Right.
Paying
Yeah,
Jasper.
I know. And those services were authorized by the case manager.
You paid for them just like you had been paying for them in previous.
But listen, if he had known that this was coming, if you had known this was coming,
I
you
would
would
have
have said,
turned over my ICFs to DDSM like my board was talking about doing, because
You lose so much money in this.
yeah, but I mean, I understand what your frustration is, I do. But, and you're right, and we are changing the rules and retroactively trying to collect money, which we don't have any business doing. But if, going forward, if you have a case manager who authorizes, then that case manager's gonna have to operate on a cap, because your band operates on a cap, doesn't it? You have a cap, you don't have unlimited resources in your band.
no, we don't have unlimited resources in our band.
Right, and
For
so
a
therefore,
band to change,
we
we have to go through the outlier system.
right, it's very difficult to change it.
Right.
So, but the case managers out there authorizing this stuff are gonna have to operate within a budget also.
Those are not case managers.
Well, they're gonna have to operate within a budget if you're gonna have to pay it back. You can't just say, y'all come on and spend all you want to on dinner, and then we're gonna leave the providers with the tab.
I'm not asking them to spend.
I know you're not.
My hands are tied with the work.
I know,
That's it.
I know, but we just can't.
They are operating within
Okay,
set parameters.
y'all, I think we need to move on with this.
Well,
We've discussed it, and obviously you think it's wrong.
yeah. So,
That's,
do we need to,
that's something we're gonna have to vote on.
would we be able to vote on this one-time money separately from the spending plan?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Well, then I would like to make a motion that.
This is-
Not today, not today, we'll
Tomorrow.
have to do
This
it
is a
tomorrow.
workshop.
Oh, okay.
Can't do it today, but we can do it tomorrow,
Why can't we do it today? Because we're not in a meeting?
because we're not in a
Workshop,
meeting,
this
we're
is
in a
not a
workshop.
Okay. All right. I just
We're
have a
getting
couple.
information so we know how to vote tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, this is just a discussion. That's why I can ask people from the audience. Don't do that during the meeting.
I just have a couple more questions about spending plans, and that's it. But, on those other earnings, I'd like to know on that revenue what that is, a little bit more detail on that. Because is that client fees, is that provider?
803.
Yeah.
That 400,000, that's baby net, that's the money we've been getting to cover those non-Medicaid individuals that we serve for the baby net population.
Now, administration, last year in the spending plan, we had 7.9 million, and this year we've got 8.9 million.
Pay raise,
It was what?
pay raise,
Okay. And then, the General Assembly approved 7.883 million. You didn't give us the what the General Assembly approved. I had that. I pulled that off the internet. So we're still higher than what was in there for admin.
it doesn't include fringe benefits.
That's kept in a different
Well,
line.
and yours does? Okay. So it was the raise factor?
Right.
Okay, let's talk about raises. The last couple of years since I've been on the commission, I have kept up with salaries of DDSN that are over $50,000. And it's public information, it's on there. It's on there all the time. And there were, last year, in fiscal year 2015, 2016, providers got a 3% raise. But for DDSN staff, there were 41 people who made over $50,000 who received like from a 4 to 18% raise. Kevin Jacoby, 18%. Deidre Sayers, 12%. Sandra Delaney, 12%. Susan Beck, 10%. Chuck Norman, 9%. Lisa Weeks, 8%. And this year, for 2017 so far, we've got some more big raises. Dexter Alston, 18%. Sandra Delaney, 15%. We've got some significant raises over. And I don't even think, other than direct care workers, providers didn't get a raise. So is there some method to this I mean, when you give somebody an 18% raise, what is that based on?
It would be a combination of factors. Some of it may be like I'm not real comfortable in a public forum talking about individual names.
Well, it's on the
But
internet.
I understand that. But like, for example, our security expert, when our IT and went and received all of this additional training and this additional certifications. Multiple agencies were hiring security experts personnel and was very sought after. So in order to retain this individual, we gave them a reclassification and a raise. Also within just the daily operations of doing business, you have to make sure that you remain competitive. You have to make sure that you remain viable to retain and recruit your employees. So, I mean, that's part of basically doing business. And if you look at DDSN's payment rates for any of these one categories in comparison to others, I'm very comfortable saying that on average, maybe not in every individual case, but on average, if you take into account length of service and education and all those things, we come below the state average, not above.
Okay, Kevin Jacoby's the highest paid auditor in the
He is.
state.
That's correct.
That's not, I mean, that's just not being competitive. That's being more than competitive.
Yeah, and he is the highest paid auditor in the state. That is correct.
Right, and when you look at these other races, providers are out there, they have to have nurses. They have to keep up with that. They have to work within their increases. I mean, to me, it just, are we going up? And how much are we going up in administrative costs this year? If last year it went up from $1 million, you're saying it was raises. How much?
Not these kinds of, right, I mean, the administrative cost is always a fluid amount. When you print something like this, what you won't see is so-and-so retired and we decided not to refill their position and absorb that within the agency or redirect it to use for something else. I mean, that's part of operating an entity. That's part of operating an agency. DDSN does not dictate to their providers whether they want to give their director of residential services a retention bonus because they've worked with them for 20 years, whether they want to, I mean, like yes, there's a payment structure and we function within our payment structure, but that is part of doing business.
Let me ask you, in 2013 and 2014, you didn't give these kind of raises.
I have absolutely, I mean, off the top of my head, I can't look at you and say.
Oh, no, I mean-
Yeah, no, I looked at it.
We played catch up for a few
Because, you know,
years.
it took us 9 months to get
Yeah.
the direct care service, the direct care workers, a little teeny raise, and they all make, I mean, they finally got up to 20,000. I mean, we're paying poverty wages for that. I mean, so I looked at 2013 and 14, and I just want to know where in the world's the money coming from all of a sudden in the last 2 years. I'm just curious, curiosity, you know, I just, because I'm not in the government. I work in the private industry, and we run everybody is tight as ticks. And so I'm just curious that all of a sudden you can have these big, huge increases. I wonder where the money came from, you know, and why didn't the direct care workers also get that? They're the heavy lifters in this group. So I'm just, curiosity killed the cat. You know, someone brought this to me, sent it to me, and I was like, oh my gosh. So I want to know, you know, where'd the money come from, Tom?
The process of doing business, you have.
And then why did you give it in
80%
2013 and 2014? I mean, I've never seen anybody in my life get, you know, I'm just curious. I want to know what it
80%
is.
of what you spend your money on is human resources. If you don't keep people around, you lose the knowledge and you lose the expertise to continue on the work production. You have to compete. You have to compete. In the state government, you aren't getting rich in state government. You aren't getting rich in the provider network. It's all a calling that you do to help your public citizen out. No one's.
Well,
No one's
I
getting
understand,
rich
listen,
here.
no one understands it more than I do. But I want to know, I'm just curiosity killed the cat. Where'd the money come from?
Can't give them the dollars that we have available, given to us.
Yeah, and again, what you're not going to see on here
And
is,
some of it, like Dr. Shamey said, is re-looking at positions. We closed down positions and used it somewhere else.
you know, or this person left because they were a 30-year employee and retired, and when we brought somebody new in, it costs less to bring them in, and therefore you give raises to the existing people within that division or in another division of the agency so that you maintain your workforce. Somebody's not going to stay working for you for 20 years if they are making the same rate as when they came in. I mean, that applies to direct care staff as well. That applies to, that's part of the reason why, you know, we've done this initiative and effort, but I guarantee, I mean, this is part of doing business. I mean, this is
We've done
retaining
food
your
service,
workforce.
We've done food service, housekeeping and all that, trying to keep them.
And at the regional center, we've done, chunks of compression pay internal to the regional center. We've done, particularly addressing nursing, we've gone and said, okay, this year, we could eke out $100,000 and let's divide it amongst the regional centers to, go and shore up some of the inequities in nursing and go, I mean, like this is those staff above a certain level. That doesn't mean that staff below a certain level haven't gotten in ranges as well. You just can't find it on the internet.
Well, I just hope that when you're giving these big raises, that you are looking at some kind of objective criteria and doing it in a way that anybody who performs at that certain level can get that same kind of raise. Otherwise, it would be a very arbitrary, slippery slope.
Well, I mean, Deirdre's in the back of the room. I mean, she can talk to, I'll call you out. I mean, we don't do anything without looking at equity. We don't do anything internal equity across the state, which is why I've looked at this so much, which is why I said I'm really comfortable. If you look at it on aggregate, what our employees make are below the state average. I mean, she's vehemently nodding her head. I mean, there's exceptions, but on average, what we're paying, particularly if you take into account years of service, we're not above, we're below.
You need to look at those exceptions, you've got to be. Now, on capital needs, capital infrastructure, we approved 2.148 in capital improvement projects this year. And you're budgeting to spend 3.2. Is that right?
Are you talking about for next year, or I'm not sure I understand your
We're
question?
looking at spending plan for this year and next year. You've got on the spending plan,
The 3.2 is the money that we're saying for needs pop up within our provider network that we would use to help needs. They service needs as code compliant issues come up, ADA compliant issues, or capacity growth, or whatever. We would try to use that money to meet those needs.
okay, so you don't have anything in mind for that right now?
We got a few. We know we got Kershaw is coming up. We got
Jericho? Is Jericho in there?
Burton Center is the roofing issue there. Charles Lee Center, Charleston's on here, that's residential.
Charles Lee and residential.
Yeah.
Charles Lee.
Charles
Big
Lee,
residential program.
Would you say?
Oh, just not in Charleston.
So
So like,
we got-
for
we
example,
got-
the Bamberg.
We got a starting list, but things are coming up during the year that will, now it's over $200,000, will come to y'all to get approved.
All right, now listen, on that Jericho project, we were told that the Housing Trust Fund was gonna pay $250,000 of it.
300.
300, are they gonna pay that?
They're still trying to get the application, in. They haven't got the application in yet.
Okay, at the time the commission voted on it, took the vote, we were told that it was a done deal.
They're still saying they're gonna do it.
Okay, but we still don't have that, so so if they don't come through,
For the 300,000.
yeah, then are we gonna plan on spending another 300 on that?
200 is the max.
How much?
We're paying 250.
Okay,
We pay 250, and their house trust is 300, and they're getting bank financing for the rest and some donations as well.
and then they got Pickens and Anderson,
They're the two providers involved.
and how much?
50 grand.
50 each, okay. Okay. So I guess the spending plan last year was 670 million, and this year it's 681 million. Is that the increases? The salaries, or primarily the salaries?
Right.
Salaries, fringe, and the insurance stuff.
There's not gonna be any expansion.
Don't mind. Only expansion will be attrition, and that's not really expansion, but the only way people will get services is if beds become available. Somebody else that's on the waiting list will take their bed or take their slot.
Okay. I've got some formats here I'd just like for y'all to look at. It's, this is a projected revenue and expenses. Just basically taking your numbers and putting them in this format. The next one is the projected revenue and expenses, and it has a spending plan for 2017 using your numbers, and then the spending plan for fiscal year 2018. And then I've got another one that's got in it the skis report actual as a column. And then it also has a column in it for what the General Assembly allocated for us this year. So it's just something that, you know, I can send everybody. I mean, give this better. It's something easier to look at, easier to read.
Can you send this electronically?
Yeah, I can. But just so that we'll have something that, because when you're looking at doing a budget, you know, you need to look at what you did last year and compare it. And we need to look at what the General Assembly gave us and compare it. I know we're never going to spend as much as they budget for us, but we ought to have some idea of what they budgeted like in administration when we go over it by $1 million.
When you go over it, you're gonna have the fringe, that's the difference. The fringe in there, on the appropriation line.
Okay.
We got one program.
It's
for
very
fringe.
difficult in this financial system that the state uses to try to figure out how that relates to how we spend the money. And I know it's an antiquated system, and it's very difficult to put it together. But there are
Brand new
things.
system, so, I mean,
Yes, keep this new.
we spent $400 million on it.
But there are things we can do, like when you put capital improvements on the spending plan, if you could put the capital improvements that we budgeted and then put other community improvements as a separate one and just kind of make them relate, and then we can follow that capital improvement thing is a chore too, the way we're doing it.
Look, I mean, if there's a specific request for how budgeting proposals are done, shouldn't that be taken up at the commission meeting and be voted on? I'm just saying.
I'm just throwing out format.
I agree. What I'm saying is I think that's.
Yeah, if we're
making a
gonna vote on
specific
one,
Yeah, if we're gonna make a specific request how it's gonna be presented, I just think.
I'm not making a request. I'm throwing out ideas about what I would like for them to look at. And one of those things also includes contracts. Community contracts on the spending plan on this format that you're using is $500-something thousand. If we had community contracts, this is how much we voted for residential, this is how much we voted for day, this is how much we, you know, and then we look at the skis report, we can kind of follow that, what we're actually spending it on. That would make it a whole lot easier to me. So I just want to share that, and I'm still not over the format problem. I mean, I still think it's very difficult to read these reports and follow anything.
We'll look at this and figure out how.
Or
I have
any
to show-
number of
yeah, I mean,
things.
I've showed, with regards to the administration, the one thing I do want to make sure everybody understands is on that skis report, that administration statewide for DDSN, whether it's a direct care staff at the regional centers, whether it's a, you know, if it's state, the fringe is all loaded on one other item. So it's not it's kind of apples and oranges when you say, oh, we're spending more than $1 million than over budget, because that's not true. Because when we've given it to you guys, we've put the fringe where it is appropriate operationally, either with the regional centers, with district office, you know, with the central office. So when you're looking at it over there, you're forgetting or not taking into account, there's this whole big chunk that's everybody that's a DDSN employee fringe that's over here that we've moved to better describe where it's actually being used. Now, we can stop and describe it differently. I mean, you know, but I don't want anybody to leave with the impression that all of a sudden administration's grown by $1 million, because it hasn't.
Well, if you compare it to last year's spending plan amount, it has.
Some of the pay.
Yeah, I mean, I just.
Some of
It was
it,
in the bottom part of the spending plan
Yes.
last year, it was in the
Yes.
secondary
Right,
section.
and within the base expenditures, so.
Right, because it hadn't been
It had
calculated.
been calculated, we didn't pass it out. It was not in the base expenditure.
Yeah, because we had to wait for them to load the money and then go it out. So while we didn't get anything in this fiscal year, if you're comparing it to last fiscal year, whatever percentage pay raise, I forget what it was.
3.25%.
Yeah, it wasn't factored in.
it was how much?
3.25,
% plus the plan.
so the thing, yeah.
And that would be $1 million?
No.
Something. that nature.
But we'll look at, if you'll send this electronically, we'll look at it and figure out what. And then, I don't, as to what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, I just think if we're asking for specific formats of stuff.
No, I'm not
We're
asking
just-
for more.
Well, okay, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's fine
Well, we
to have
gotta
that.
have-
I just think we need to,
We gotta start having some conversations about format.
I agree with you. I'm just saying, I think we just need, I think it's our obligation as commissioners to let staff know clearly what we're asking for in that format. I agree with you. The more information we, you know, I love to have great information. I love it. But I think we do need to, as a commission, say, as a commission, I want all this, not, well, I want this number, Tom, and I want this number, Beverly.
No, I agree with you 100%. I'm gonna use the format that I wanna use based on what's sent out, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, we can all use our own one.
Right.
But I think other people should look at any kind of drafts and say, what, you know, what you want divided out. What, you know, because I think the closest we can get to what we actually, what we approve in community contracts, what we approve in capital improvements, if those were spelled out on the spending plan, a little
I mean,
bit clearer.
yeah, I mean, they're spelled out elsewhere.
Well, that's the problem, they're spelled out on 12 different places.
We just talked, we just talking.
Right, we're just talking, that's it,
Yeah, we just trying to have a conversation about what we like.
that's it, that's it.
Anything else we need?
I think we will do some skeletal numbers for y'all to look at.
Okay.
As far as tomorrow, based on conversations today.
All right, so we are gonna adjourn, and we'll meet back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. for our monthly meeting. Thank you.